All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7:04 p.m., so I'd like us to begin by standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. We have a very full agenda this evening, and I'm going to ask everyone to be mindful of that and be mindful of all of the items that we need to discuss this evening, try to move things along. If I seem like I push things too much, please object and all, but I'm going to make an effort that we get everything the time it deserves and that we get through this meeting and accomplish a lot. So, my name is David Atkins. I'm chairing the meeting. All meetings of the Westwood Planning Board are recorded by Westwood Media Center. And if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to record this meeting, I'd like you to please identify yourself now so that everyone else is aware of that. I don't see anyone else recording the meeting. The agenda is available at the back of the room. The meeting will follow the order on the agenda. It will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. The format of the meeting, in general, is that when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application. The board will proceed to staff comments, peer review comments, anything like that, and may ask questions of the applicant while they're presenting or immediately thereafter. We'll then have an opportunity for public comment, and when it's time for public comment, I will call those wishing to speak to the podium. When you come to speak, please come to the podium, identify yourself, your address, and speak into the microphone, because all of our meetings being recorded, people will be able to watch these on YouTube and on the local cable channels. But if you speak from the audience, a lot of times it doesn't pick it up on the microphone. In fact, it seldom does. And so when people look at that afterwards, it's a dead silence. So it's very important that everyone identify themselves and speak into the microphone. So all people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. Unfortunately, our town planner was not able to be with us tonight, but we have our conservation agent, Karen Catrone, here filling in. And I'm going to open this. I know that on the agenda, the first item, we've had the applicant has requested to withdraw their application. The first item is an environmental impact design review public hearing for facade improvements for Tesla car dealership at 420 Providence Highway. So far, we've heard no testimony. I believe typically we would grant a request to withdraw this application without prejudice. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Is there? Thank you, Chris. And there is in the materials the formal version of that motion, I believe. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So now we will close this. This is a public hearing, so we need to close the public hearing. I need a motion from a board member to do that.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The public hearing is closed, and the applicant will be allowed to withdraw the application. Moving on to the second item on the agenda, this is for 248 to 252 Nahatan Street, a public hearing for a limited environmental impact design review to remove and replace a double-sided sign at First Parish Church. This comes to the planning board as a limited design review. I will invite the applicant to come forward in a moment, but first I note that typically we waive application fees for nonprofit community groups like this, and I'd like to ask the board if someone will make a motion to waive the application filing fee for First Parish.
I'll make a motion to waive the filing fee for the First Parish Church.
And
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of waiving the application fee, please
Aye.
say aye. Aye. Any noes? No abstentions. Thank you. Now I invite, is there a representative from First Parish to speak on this? Hi, if you could come and identify yourself and describe the application.
Hi, I'm Brian Bayer. I'm the moderator at First Parish of Westwood. Also with me is Charlie Domina, a longtime member. We just completed a large addition project and site work on our site, which was finished about a year ago. And now we are looking to, as sort of a tail end of that project, we're looking to replace the existing sign. It's an old sign, it's a wood sign, it's kind of falling apart. It's been there for as long as anyone can remember, and we're looking to replace that with a new sign in the same location, same size, a little bit more durable materials, granite posts, and a composite signboard. It's almost exactly similar. It's actually the same manufacturer as the town, as the sign company is the same manufacturer. It does the town signs, so it would look very similar to the sign at the police station, the fire station. There's other. I'm trying to think of the other public buildings in town that. The Baptist church, similar, but it's larger. So it's been in that location. There's a sliver, and I don't know if you can pull up the site plan, maybe.
Yep. There you go.
Although you'd have to blow it up, but that intersection, it's at the intersection of Nahatan Street and Clapboard Tree Street, where there's that triangular section of land. And if you can blow in enough where you can see, there's a sliver of that section that is actually, I believe it's a town right-of-way along the street, and the sign's in that area. We would like to keep it in that same place. It's been there forever. It's a great place to see it from both directions. It does not obstruct the view of traffic in either direction. When you're approaching it from either direction, you actually see sort of the trees and landscape of the adjacent properties behind it, so it doesn't visually block the road in any way. So that's all we're asking for.
Well, thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Or
I just have a question. If you're going to say you're going to go to granite posts, are they going to enlarge the size of the post, I would imagine?
I'm not sure the existing wood post, if it's a 4x4 or...
Looks to be a 4x4.
Yeah.
But you most likely go to a 8x6 granite posting for a sign.
Sure, it might be like a 6x6 or
Something on this.
7x7.
7x7s, but it will be larger. I'm just concerned with maybe, because coming up over the hill, it's not a problem at this time, but I just don't know if the larger columns
Yeah,
are going to impede the vision up Nahatan Street towards the high school.
it is set back enough from towards the church, away from the road. I was just driving up that way today, and really, it does not impede the vision of the street at all. So as you're pulling up, just the background behind it is basically trees. It's hard to see. Well, that's oriented the wrong way.
Should be a rotate bar up there.
Did it say rotate up there?
That picture's taken from the grass, right? Not the road.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Right here? I tried that, didn't
Okay, now go.
Keep going to the right.
Keep going.
Keep going. No, slide the cursor to the right. Move your cursor to the right. You're on the right.
Oh,
You were there.
oh, here, oh, okay.
So its location is it's set back quite far from the intersection and away from the
I'm sorry,
street.
what's it under?
review?
And then
Right to the tools.
View,
And
yeah.
go down to the rotate
First one,
view.
now
and
to the right.
Go all the
Oh,
way
I
over
see, I'm
to
sorry.
those. There you go.
Just
And
keep going till
clicking
it's-
that.
there you go.
There we go. We got there.
Yeah, so I can see that the way it's set back there, it's not going to impede the view up Manhattan Street.
yeah, you almost see that tree in the background is kind of what you see all the way as you're turning up towards Nahatan.
Right,
from
and we're also about 10 feet off the road here from this picture view. Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, are you going to do essentially the same post holes, same location for that, or is it going to
It's the
expand
same.
one way or
It's
the
the
other?
same size sign, same height, same width. Yeah.
All right.
And there's also there's, I think, a single light. There's electrical there for that to illuminate the sign, and a garden there, and that will be the same aesthetic
On both sides,
going forward, yeah.
lit up.
It sits right on top there.
Are there any other questions from board members? Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? So I think we would need a motion to approve this application.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the EIDR, the limited EIDR for 248 to 252 Nahatan Street, the First Parish Church.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The application is approved. And since this is a public hearing also, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing for 248 to 252 Nahatan Street, First Parish Church.
Do
I second that motion.
have a motion and a second? Did you have a?
I just had a question.
Sure.
It was my understanding from Abby that there was not a waiting period then if this was approved because of the limited, because it's just a sign and the limited nature. I just wanted to clarify that.
Not from this board, and I,
There's not a waiting period. Okay.
no.
Okay.
I'm not
So we
aware.
can go ahead with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You're free to go forward.
Free to go forward.
Thank you.
From a signage perspective.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Okay.
I didn't get clarification, so I'm just going to play it safe. Go ahead.
So the third item on the agenda is a University Station Pulte Homes of New England request for temporary use for a sales trailer not located on the same lot and signage associated with that. This is a location where 100 condominiums are being built, and putting a sales trailer on the site would constitute an accessory use, which under bylaw section 97441 requires a determination by the planning board that such a use is generally compatible with the surrounding development area. And I understand,
Yeah, I will, due to a conflict of interest, I will be recusing myself for all discussion and voting on this particular hearing.
all right, thank you. Will the applicant please come to the podium, introduce yourself, and present the application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to see you all again. For the record, I'm Mark Mastriani. I'm here representing Pulte Homes of New England, and we are the owner and developer of Westwood Place, as you mentioned, the 100-unit residential condominium being built off of University Ave. So we're here tonight asking for your review and approval of our temporary sales trailer and related signage associated with Westwood Place. We submitted a letter to the board back on July 24th, asking a letter request asking for your approval for the temporary sales trailer as it's installed in the field and for the signage for up to 2 years from the date of the letter, which would be July 23rd of 2020. So we're asking for a two-year approval. Just wanted to step back for a moment and apologize to this board. Yeah, I just mentioned that the sales trailer is installed or is partially installed. So we would never intentionally install a temporary sales trailer without proper approvals. We had no idea that this board needed to review it, but it was brought to our attention, and here we are. And my understanding is it requires review because it's technically not on it's not on our lot. So I can look at the screen over here, but if you recall, University, that doesn't work on that screen. But University Ave is up at the top, and our 100 units is off of the common driveway down by the railroad tracks. And it's a very, very small parcel. And the sales trailer is installed at the corner of the common driveway, Bridges Driveway, and University Ave, which is technically owned by Paul Sincata and his team, the master developer of University Station. I just want to mention it was properly permitted, and we provided copies of some documents in our submission. We did submit a request to the building inspector and did receive a building permit for the temporary sales trailer, and that copy was provided to you. We did have proper permission from the owner to install this sales trailer, and we provided the owner's permission to the board as well. And we had prepared a proper, engineering plan before installing the trailer too, and a copy of that plan was also provided to this board. Since this submission, we did receive comments from Abby and also from your peer review engineer, Beta. I believe Phil Paradis is with us tonight. We received comments that the parking area should be paved, that the parking spaces should be striped, non-paved areas should be loamed and seeded, that we provide temporary low-impact development measures like a swale to temporarily control the runoff from the paved area, and to provide catch basin protection for catch basins adjacent to the project, like silt sacks. We support all of those comments, and today we submitted revised plans back to this board and back to Phil and Beta, and that's what's on. So that's what's on the screen that you see here tonight. So the first one is the updated revised exhibit, which shows, and we bubbled up the comments, and unfortunately, I don't know, I guess the pointer doesn't work on the screen, but what we did is we called out that the parking service should be paved, we called out that the parking spaces should be striped, and we added the note that the adjacent catch basins should have protection. And then if you could just switch to the second exhibit. The other thing that Phil and Beta had asked for was an updated plan showing the treatment of the off-pavement areas. So we had prepared this exhibit to respond to that comment, and this shows the temporary sales trailer and its surroundings. So it shows the paved parking area, the striped parking. It shows some LID grass swales to temporarily control the runoff. It shows landscaping. It shows the grassed areas. It shows everything that really had been asked for us, and we were really happy with the plan. So we did submit this to Beta today, and we did receive some updated correspondence back that we had satisfactorily addressed all of his comments. So that's our request, and one important item to note: our request is to use this temporary trailer for up to 2 years, which really would allow us to sell all of the 100 units associated with our project. And the reason the temporary sales trailer and signage is not installed on our lot is because our lot is really small. If you recall, it's only 2 acres by the railroad tracks. There's no extra room. So very early on, we worked with Paul and his team to locate this temporary trailer on their land, very proximate to our Westwood Place development. The temporary sales trailer provides a visible, accessible, safe, convenient, clear, and welcoming parking area for the public visiting our site. It allows us to corral the public, minimizing people from driving around our private development, wandering unattended, and not knowing where to go. We're selling homes to people, so privacy is very important to our homeowners, and this temporary trailer allows us to separate the residents from the public. During construction, it's a busy construction site, and we really need to control the site. And again, our property in this specific instance is very uniquely small, as our community is part of the overall master plan of University Station. So we did work out all these details with Paul, and we're here tonight, asking for your support. This temporary trailer is extremely important to us in the efficient and the success of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to make any comments, or are you generally in agreement with you guys have worked? Okay, great. So I think that those were the first three potential conditions here were to ensure that. I think the concern that I've heard from that have been raised was that by having this temporary trailer here for 2 years, it prevents development on the rest of that site. And why could you possibly, after the first certificate of occupancy is issued, couldn't you operate this out of the building? And then this would free up the space here to be developed in the rest of University Station.
Yeah, and I don't know if Paul wants to jump in on that, but as I mentioned, we had worked with Paul and his team very early on, and in no way will this temporary sales trailer impact the development of this site. We have agreements between our two teams that should Paul have a tenant or have an opportunity to develop this piece of land, then we have agreements in place that he has the right to do that, and we would need to move it. But I can let you speak more to that.
Good evening. For the record, Paul Sincotta with New England Development. So that's correct. There's an agreement between NED and Pulte that says that if there's any kind of a prospective deal where a land transfer or development happens on that corner, then Pulte's required to be relocated, and if we can find other accommodations within the development, then that's an opportunity, and if that can't happen, then Pulte needs to figure it out on their own property. Clearly, the thought being that at least for the very near term, this can serve to get the first building underway. And
Well, I think you'd also have to come back here, right, if you were going to move. So if something like that happened and you needed to move, you were going to move
Correct.
the trailer to a different location,
And
we'd have to repeat this process.
And this part of the development is targeted for an office use, and so certainly an office user here would require that an approval process be gone through, and then ultimately, construction drawings, building permits. There's a fair lead time before you actually need to physically begin work on the property, should there be a development on this particular corner.
Thank you. Are there other board members?
Yeah, what would keep you from being able to move this office, and once that first building is occupied, to move the offices in?
Yeah, I think that's why at the beginning I tried to take the time to go through all of the reasons. This is quite an effort, what we do to this temporary sales trailer. It's buried in the ground. It's heavily landscaped. It's really an attractive feature that we're providing. It's really the face of our company, and it's what we're presenting first to our homeowners. So there's quite a bit of resources, time and effort going into this temporary trailer. And the location of the temporary trailer provides a safe, convenient location for the public, very visible, very clear of where the public shall go when they want to visit our site. So brokers, customers, the public driving by, it's safe, it's at the entrance, and then it allows us and our sales team in order to meet our guests and then be able to attend with them and walk them through into our buildings and show them around and go through the sales process with them. Without the temporary trailer at this corner, the public would be driving down the common driveway past the very busy construction site, coming into a private development, and it would be it's congested. It's very tight. We have both buildings under construction already, which was one of the strong desires and concerns of this board during permitting. I'm happy to report that construction schedule that we worked so hard on, that we're on schedule on the first building and we're ahead of schedule on the second building, which I know we spent a lot of time on. So it's incredibly important for us to have this attractive, clear amenity in order to to really efficiently, go through our sales process. Because we're all aligned, right? We all want this job to be complete, for us to finish, for it to be successful, and having this temporary trailers where it's located will give us the best opportunity. I mean, if we were to have to move it halfway through the process, it'll take time to break it down. It'll take time to reset something up. It'll take time to re-educate brokers, the public, everything that we worked on to get set up. We'll have to undo it and then redo it, and all that will significantly impact sales.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Anyone in the audience? Just
Come to the podium,
please come to the podium and
My name is Ken Foscaldo, 35 Norfolk Ave. I hear referred to temporary trailer for 2 years. I'm not sure if I find it all that compensatory that the trailer not be moved. That you're going to have to bring your prospective buyers down to the site at some point. It seems to me that could be more of an inconvenience to go to the trailer park and then be taken down to the site. But also, does temporary carry any legal weight as far as, is this trailer going to be assessed and the property assessed and taxed appropriately for this temporary trailer to be there?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would say no.
Oh, I would say why? My house is assessed, and this is a functional, usable, and according to the gentleman that's speaking, a very effective part of their property now. I would think it would have to be assessed, and if not, I wouldn't understand why not.
Well,
The word temporary keeps coming up.
well, I think temporary. It's the intention is that it would end in 2 years.
and this is owned land that taxes are being paid on. Just
Yeah, but
being
not-
loaned. Being loaned.
I'm talking
Pulte.
about the trailer.
I
And
understand.
the trailer was aptly described with how nice it is and the landscaping that's being put in there to present an attractive face of the project, and I understand that. But I would think that, land is assessed and buildings on land are assessed. So I'm curious, temporary is 2 years, and that's fine, but does that change anything from the assessed value of the property?
And again, I believe that would be up to the assessor of the town of Westwood to make that determination, or not to. I have a recommendation that I say we approve a permit for this temporary trailer for 1 year. And if a year from now, Pulte still wants or says it has a need for that trailer to be there at that site, they can come before the board and make their case.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
That is exactly my motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve, excuse me here for my language here, to approve the temporary trailer site at, I got an address here.
The address isn't here.
Temporary trailer for Pulte Incorporated at the corner of University Ave.
Common drive.
Bridges Driveway, for the period of 1 year, with an extension to be discussed if need be after the 1 year ends.
And subject to the conditions.
Subject to the conditions that were previously discussed. Parking areas shall be paved. Stormwater improvements outlined in memos in 8.3 from Pill Paradis. And LID measures and catch basin protection. Parking spaces shall be painted and lined. The use,
That's,
so conditions 1 through 3. And again, we'll approve this for 1 year.
Is that from tonight?
Yes.
And just to clarify, was the motion for temporary trailer and temporary signage? Because that was, it's part of the request.
Signage we haven't spoke of yet.
Okay.
Shall we get into the signage?
Of course.
The floor is yours.
Oh, it was part of the, I mean, I was saying temporary trailer and temporary signage is the request. It was part of the, it's part of the
What is
request.
the
So if you go
temporary
back,
signage going to look like?
if you go back to the first exhibit. This was something that we worked on with Abby on.
Oh, right here.
And so it's really a simple signage. So basically, there's a temporary sales community sign, which is if you're looking at the bottom right-hand corner, the signs that we put on the corner, it says Westwood Place and New Homes. And that's at the corner of Bridges Driveway and University Station. And then there's an arrow that points you into the sales center. That's a sign. And then there's a wall-mounted sign that goes on the temporary trailer, which is that little one. And then there's a handicap accessible parking sign. I had previously worked with Abby on these signs, and we had made them a little bit smaller so that they can conform with the zoning.
This is going to be the parking sign. The arrow is going to, that's, I believe, here. Here's your sign, the arrow's going to point you down to the sales sign. Correct in that? I'm wondering where the arrowed sign for the sales center, where is that exactly going to be located? Sure. Oh, on the opposite side of the street?
Goes on the corner.
Okay.
And you pull onto the common driveway, and then there's the arrow tells you to take a left.
Get you in the driveway.
And then the sales office sign goes on.
Okay.
all right. So I think your motion is to approve the sales trailer and the signage starting today for
For
1
Pulte
year.
Homes in New England, starting today for the temporary request for a sales trailer for 1 year at the corner of University Ave and the common driveway of Bridges.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One. I forgot you were recused here. So the temporary use is approved for 1 year, and then we'll see you again, or maybe they'll all be sold by then and everybody.
We hope so.
That'd be great.
Yeah. No, we hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Thanks.
Okay. Item number 4 on the agenda is Morgan Farm Estates, Open Space Residential District, Environmental Impact Design Review of a definitive subdivision minor modification. So this is a proposal to modify the Morgan Farm Estates subdivision that was approved in February 2012, where this board also conducted the environmental impact design review. There were some modifications. The final plans were approved in February 2013. Today, I understand the applicant comes to us to discuss some grading and a retaining wall and is requesting that we consider this to be a minor modification. I also have a letter from the building inspector who informs us that the construction of the wall has actually already been done. And So I would like the applicant to please come to the podium, identify yourself, and tell us what you were thinking.
Great. My name's Lou Petrozzi. I'm Wall Street Development Corp. We're the developers of Morgan Farm Estates. It was the first open space residential development that was permitted in Westwood back a few years ago. We're here tonight. I don't know if this comes off or not. We're here tonight basically for a minor modification. And quite honestly, not quite sure why we're here. But the original subdivision was approved with a retaining wall on Lot 10 in the back of the, along the property line. During construction, there was a significant amount of ledge. This was a huge hill that turned out to be mostly of ledge that required a significant amount of blasting. Originally, when the house on this lot was designed, it was contemplated that there would be a walkout basement. The retaining wall was designed as 6 foot high, but due to the ledge on the site, the house couldn't be put in the ground as deep as originally thought of. So the house was raised up, and that resulted in a more steeper type of backyard that we decided required the elimination of a walkout basement, but to make a level backyard to increase the height of the proposed wall that was originally approved. We designed this originally as a 2-tiered wall, 6 feet and 4 feet, because we thought it would be more conducive to the yard area. But after talking to our structural engineer, he thought it would be more practical to just do as one continuous wall with no tiering. So we went to the Conservation Commission, got our modification from the Conservation Commission under our orders of conditions. It was only subsequent to our starting of construction that it was brought to our attention that we may need a minor modification from the planning board for this work. So, and we were told at that time that the planner would make that decision, that it wouldn't require the planning board to make a decision on it, that it was so minor in nature that it would be done without appearing in front of the planning board. So we proceeded with the construction of the wall. We filed for a build. This has been going on for almost 3 months now. So so that's pretty much it. The wall is constructed. The semantics of whether a building permit is required or not is, the original wall did not require a building permit. You were allowed to go as high as 6 feet without a building permit. We comply with all the zoning requirements. It was only after we determined that we were going to go higher than that that we filed for the building permit. So it was both things were going on at the same time, and as a result of the communications that we had over the past few months, the wall was completed.
So what is the height of the fence? Like, what are we?
So there are two factors that we're concerned about as developers. So the height of the wall along the back now is 10 feet. And we will eventually have to install like a 4-foot wrought iron fence or a stockade or a picket fence or whatever, and that fence would go along the top of the wall. On the side, this wall here is between 6 and 8 feet on this side, and then it just steps up to the 10 feet along here, and then it just drops back down to match the existing contours. And it's in the approximate location that was approved on the original plan. As you can see, that was the original subdivision plan that shows the wall that was approved. I don't even know that it was necessary to approve it. It complies with the zoning requirements, so it's sort of there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not it requires any kind of approval at all, period.
Let's see, do we have any comments? Phil from Beta, did you?
Yeah, he's got a report. I'd like to hear from him.
Typical of any application that comes before the board, Abby asked us to go and review it. I sent a colleague of mine, Chris Lupino, out to the site. He began reviewing what he could. He was kicked off the site, not allowed to finish his observation. He didn't find anything wrong with it, but he couldn't.
Who kicked him off the site?
I understand it was
Well,
Mr. Petrozzi.
He wasn't kicked off the site. We just told him that the wall was already constructed.
No, he was intimidated and kicked off the site. So,
All right.
he's never been, you know,
Okay.
so,
He's an experienced gentleman working in the construction field, correct?
yes.
Thank you.
So, you know, we don't necessarily see an issue with the plan. Like I said, we always go out to the site, make sure it's as depicted on the plan. We
And to
couldn't,
be clear, he was acting on the planning board's behalf.
correct,
He was thrown off the site.
correct.
And now you're here looking for relief from the planning board.
I'm not looking for any relief. I don't need any relief.
Okay.
All right, well, I mean, we also have, at least the building inspector believes that you needed a permit, so I think, and then if we're unable to perform an inspection of the site,
The site was inspected by a structural engineer that designed the wall and submitted the plans. So,
I think.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil, thank you.
So a permit was never issued for this wall, right?
There's
Or there
an
was one.
application that's pending for the additional height of the wall.
And the original wall was going to be 6 then 4 feet?
No, the original wall is 6 feet on the plan.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, the grading of the site was such that we were going to try and create a walkout basement so that when you walked out of the basement, it would be level with the height of the wall. But because of the site conditions that were experienced during construction, it was felt not to do any additional blasting, and because there was quite a bit of rock that had to be removed, not to do any additional blasting, but to raise the height of the basement floor. That resulted in not allowing for a walkout basement, so that necessitated the elevation of the wall to be higher.
I understand.
The issue of whether a building permit was required or not, if you were in the, out there building, you have permission to build a 6-foot wall. A 6-foot wall does not require a building permit. When we make the determination after that to either not go with a 2-tiered wall, which would, again, not require a building permit, but instead do a single wall with an additional 4 feet of height, that's what would trigger a building permit. So when that decision is made, we're already in midstream of construction. So it's, when we filed for the building application, we had no idea that this was going to get kicked back as a requirement for a modification to an OSRD or whatever you call it, permit. So that's the set of circumstances that we're dealing with. So things happen when you're in construction, and because of the threshold of 6 feet versus any other additional height triggers a building permit, we're already building. And, the design of the wall was done by a structural engineer. He's inspected the wall. So I quite frankly don't understand Mr. Doyle's concern.
Was the 2-tiered wall, was that spelled out in the decision by the planning board back in 2013, that that's what
No,
was?
there was no mention of walls, period. If you look at I don't know if I think you might have been here when
I had just come on.
Yeah.
Not remembering the
I mean, if you-
particulars of this.
It was the first open space residential development that was proposed. You know, now that I'm hearing some of the semantics of, oh, if you change the elevations of the houses, you gotta come back, or if you change the location of the houses, you gotta come back. That's not our understanding of the site plan, or the environmental impact review that we received. It was a subdivision. We comply with all the setback requirements, so,
But it was filed as an OSRD subdivision, which is
it was,
much more detailed than,
It wasn't that
than a
much.
regular subdivision.
yeah, it might have been, but
Well,
it
that's
was,
the distinction here.
well, the distinction is that at that time, I don't know if you recall or not, but it was a kind of a litigation settlement that was ongoing with the town, so I don't want to try and diminish the OI, whatever you call it, the environmental review that was done, but it was certainly not the type of detailed decision that you would render for some of the type of commercial buildings that you typically see as applicants under that regulation.
Well, I think, we can go back in time and try to see what things were, but the easiest thing to do would be to call the building inspector and say, do you think this needs a permit now? And the second easiest thing to do would be to allow our agent onto the property to take a look at it and reassure them that everything's going along fine. Instead, what we have is not getting the permit, telling us that you don't need a permit, and kicking the guy off the property.
So that's totally, I'm not even going to get into that, but it's totally untrue. That wasn't the nature of the conversation.
I think moving forward, what can
We filed for a building permit. We submitted all the requirements for a building permit. The building inspector wanted us to appear to get a modification of the environmental review before he issued the permit. There's no disagreement about the permit or what is required to get a permit. All of those requirements have been submitted and have been submitted since the first week in June. So the only thing that I think is bothersome here is that there's a disagreement over whether or not a building permit should have been issued prior to any kind of minor modification, if you want to call it that, for this particular permit. So,
Well, that's kind of what's before us now, is to determine whether or not this is a minor modification. And it sounds like the substantive details are colored by the process here, that I think we, at a minimum, we need to be able to inspect the property and complete the review. And we have a number of conditions here that we need to get more information. I mean, I don't know what other board members think about this, but I'm uncomfortable with just going ahead.
Well, I think, like you said, we need to determine if the changes in the building plan from what were approved in 13 are in fact minor in nature and not extending beyond that. If this board finds that not having a walkout basement and the alteration of the wall from 6 to 10 feet is minor, then we can rule as such, and then the applicant still needs to deal with the building department and the issue of the permits and whether, and what, you can go forward on that. But as we've got notification here from our building inspector that everything was done without his approval, and he wanted the opportunity to rule on this, and he's not indicating whether or not he thinks it's minor or not. That's up to us. But he has conveyed to this board that he doesn't appreciate work being done before full approval has been given.
I know what his position is, and we've had several discussions about his position, but as I said earlier, I don't think that it's necessary for us to be here. And we filed for a building permit. We expected a building permit to be issued. He made a determination that, well, it's different than what's on the plan, so you need to go back to the planning board. We disagree. Okay.
Well, we're not going to go against our building inspector.
Well, it's two separate issues. He's the building
And I
commissioner
laid that
regarding a
out.
building
I-
permit. This board is, it's regarding whether or not this is a minor modification or not.
Why,
And-
in there, it indicates the possibility of a second two-car detached garage. What's the need for that, based on the
Well, we
conditions
had,
that you?
yeah, another situation has come up where we've had interest from people who want four-car garages. So, again, there's some sort of a regulation, a zoning bylaw that says you need a special permit for anything additional to 3 cars.
Is this the last house?
No, there's two more units.
And any of the houses built have four-car garage?
None of them so far. This is the first time we've actually had somebody that expressed an interest in a 4-car garage, and the only way we could do it at that time was to create a separate detached building that would be accommodated, that would allow for additional cars to be parked inside the building, inside a building. So that buyer is no longer in play, but the issue of whether or not we should proceed with some sort of modification to allow that, rather than have to keep coming back. Who makes that decision anyways? Is it the Board of Appeals or is it the planning board?
For which
The
question?
additional 4-car garage or additional garage space on the property.
Well, in your description of what's happening there, to me, that does not sound like what I would call a minor modification to the plans, asking to build another structure on the
These-
property that big.
These are 6,000 square foot, 7,000 square foot houses.
Well, I know any shed over 120 square feet, you need a building permit for, so adding 6,000, I don't, my gut reaction, I'd like to look at it further, but my gut reaction is that doesn't sound minor to me, to your plans that were approved.
I'm not here to argue with the board. I'm just here to.
No, you're seeking the approval of the board. and That's why I asked about the garage.
If the board would feel more comfortable with not including the garage as part of its modification process, we would draw that part of the application. We're here simply to complete the process for this retaining wall because it was necessary to proceed with construction at the time. We were in the middle of construction, and there was no way to stop the construction at that time.
So are there any other board members who want to comment on this?
I think that I'm just having a hard time understanding, obviously you've been a builder for a while, and you went from 6 feet for retaining wall to 12 feet. Didn't think to ask whether it needed.
Oh, we know. We knew that going from 6 to 10 feet would require a building permit, and we did. We filed for the building permit when this was ongoing. The process at that time should have been, or in our estimation should have been, you file for your permit, you give them the plans, you have structural engineer review the comments, and you get a building permit. The only element that caused the problem here was because this was an OSDR approval. And there was, because it was the first one approved in Westwood, there was a confusion over whether or not it was necessary to go back to the board for a modification, or whether the planner could make that decision, or whether or not, because the wall was shown originally, it didn't require anything, and the fact that we comply with all the zoning bylaws. So, if you have something that's already approved and you're putting it in the place where you think it, or where it's approved to go, you're in the process of building it, and then you decide, oh, for safety reasons, we want to go 4 feet higher, that triggers another approval process, which is a building permit, and that's what we filed. There's no misunderstanding in terms of what's required in terms from a building permit standpoint.
And even though they tried to contact you multiple times,
Who?
according to the letter here, there are phone calls and,
Everything is done online. I mean, I don't know who's calling me.
So I think tonight, what we would need to do as a board, we're here to find out, to determine whether it's a minor modification or not. And in order to do
See how
that,
we can go, I don't see how we can determine that without our representatives being allowed on the site to inspect the site.
So I think we need town and Beta authorization to inspect the property and complete their review. We need to clarify the dimensions of the fence height. I think you answered that, but we need certification for a structural engineer that the wall has been installed in accordance with final design plans. We need documentation that the Conservation Commission has been notified of these changes. I think
Karen can verify that we have a modification to the order of conditions. I mean, that was our first step.
Approved for a minor modification for this wall on May 9th from the Conservation Commission.
so. Fundamentally, it's just that we need the authorization to inspect the property and complete the review. And
Okay.
I mean, we can vote on whether we find it to be a minor modification, but I'm not sensing that that would be a positive vote. Is there any, do we need to take any further action tonight, or do we need to, I think we've given direction as to what we would like to see.
There's nothing for me to do. I mean, obviously, if you folks think it's, I mean,
It's the next meeting.
So our next
the
meeting is.
decision of whether or not it's a minor modification or not is irrelevant to a site inspection, because it's the height of the wall. If you're looking for an as-built of the wall, once it's built, and a report from the structural engineer to certify that it's been built in accordance with the standard practices of retaining walls, we'll be happy to provide that, but I don't see what's gonna change.
I understand your desire to decouple
Well,
the issues here, but
It's not decoupling, that's what it
if,
is.
I mean, if someone wants to make a motion, we could vote on it now.
Vote on what now?
Whether it's minor or not.
No, I'm not prepared to vote on whether it's a minor modification or not.
I'd like to have that the agent inspection. And I just have one question. What is the distance between the property line and the wall on the side?
In which case? Here?
Yeah,
This location?
that's exactly right.
Under the OSRD regulations, the minimum zone setback is 10 feet sideline.
Wall to, but
Any
what
structure.
do you have it on the plan? That's what I'm wondering.
That's probably like 3 to 5 feet. Under the zoning bylaws, you're allowed to build the wall right on the property line up to 6 feet. If it's higher than that, then you need to meet the setback requirements for an accessory structure, which for this district would be 5 feet. Anything over 6 feet would be, or anything over, I think 15 feet would require setback requirement 15 feet. So we comply with all of those.
No, I was just, you answered the question. I was just wondering what the
Yeah.
distance was. Thank you.
I mean, theoretically, just play this out. This house could have been built right on that line. That's what's permitted under the OSRD, so,
No, I'm not, I'm just concerned about this plan as it is. I don't have any other questions.
okay.
All
I'd
right,
like to
so
make a motion to continue this to our next meeting, September the 5th, here in this room at 7 PM.
I second that.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, the fifth item on our agenda concerns 5 Eldridge Place. This is a public hearing for an earth material movement,
Just sit down over here.
EIDR, to import more than 200 cubic yards of earth in the rear of the property to level the yard. So in this case, this will involve a presentation by the applicant, some comments from our peer review consultant and town staff, board questions, and public comment. I would note this is a retroactive application for moving 608 cubic yards of material onto the property. So with that, let's invite the applicant to the podium to present.
So, Mr. Chairman, my name is John Glossa, Glossa Engineering, 46 East Street and East Walpole, and I'm here representing Joseph Uriarty, who's sitting here in front of you, who, as you said, not exactly sure when, but earlier this year, sort of some youthful enthusiasm, he had about 600 yards or so of material spread in his backyard. And this is at 5 Eldridge Place. So Eldridge Place is off of Curtis Street, which is off of 1A, off of Washington Street, over in Islington. I did bring some plans, some little, if you need a little locus. I think I did bring some. That might help you sort of find the,
Yeah, this is, it's between the Wentworth Conservation Area that's down near where the Islington train station is and
yeah, a
Washington
little
Street.
bit beyond, yeah. So it sort of backs up, it's where the railroad actually crosses over Route 1. Let me just see if I can find those plans.
So this is Curtis Street here. This is Eldridge.
And it just drops off.
Yeah, I think
Washington's up here.
Yeah.
I live like a quarter mile away from him, so but other folks may not.
Okay, so, take this out of here. Sorry. So I'm just going to look here. You can look there, but I just colored one of these plans up. And I will say this, you know, I know that this has to go to the Conservation Commission, but when I talked, so Joe called me a month or so ago, and when I talked to Abby, she said you better get the application in because there's a possibility that fines might start adding up. So I put this in, but I did not have time to file this with the Conservation Commission. But I will be filing it shortly, so it will be on the September 12th hearing, and we can go forward from there. But I just, because the plan might not be as easy to read without a little color on it, I just quickly sort of colored this up just to show you, you know, here's Curtis Street, and Curtis Street sort of ends, and then Eldridge goes off to the left. I think there's maybe 2 houses on this side of Eldridge and maybe 3 on this side or so, and then it just dead ends. Curtis Street, it keeps going, but there's no pavement there. It's
That's
just
the drop off.
That's the drop off here. And then the sewer is brought up and actually comes cross-country across this property. And I think does it just end here, do you know? Or, and then there's another lateral that comes up to service these 2 houses here. And if you went out there, one thing you would notice is the property lines, the fences, the shrubs are at 90 degrees to the street and the houses. I mean, physically, that's what it looks like. But as you can see, the property lines are extremely skewed to the houses, and you can even see that this shrub line is at an angle like this and doesn't really follow the property line at all. But it's sort of maintained as the property line a bit. So again, Joseph had some fill, about 600 yards. And again, I can't tell you the exact number, but what I did is, and with Karen's help, and with Joseph's operator, we went out with a mini excavator, but a fairly good-sized excavator, and we dug 3 test pits across here to help us determine where the old ground was, and then by knowing, but from survey, where the filling ends, and by sort of just by common knowledge, you can kind of see where the ground was up around the house, and that's how I calculated the amount of fill. So what you see in blue is Joseph's 2 lots. It's lot 14 and lot 17, so each lot's about 9,000 square feet. So there's about 18,000 square feet here. What I didn't color up, there's some wetlands in the back here, which were actually flagged by Karen, I think, at the direction of the Conservation Commission. I think there was some concern that perhaps this was either in or too close to the wetlands, so Karen had flagged this, and we located those. And then what's in yellow is our sort of interpretation. When you go out there, it's pretty easy to see what was filled and where it was altered and where it wasn't altered. So that's sort of the limit of the altered area. The red line is the top of the slope, and then again the yellow back here would be the bottom of the slope that's there now. So this is all new slope in here. And then what I show in green would be sort of the limit of what would be in the future, what we would hope would be, the lawn area, and then leaving the rest as the slope. So because it's already been done, there's a lot of questions in your form about trucking and all of these things. Well, that's already been done. So we didn't really sort of answer those. This area, and as you can see from my test pits, so when you look at these test pits, HTM sounds very fancy, but it's human transported material, so it's fill. But what they did is they put in some test pit 1, they put in some sort of loamy sand, and then they covered it with what I call the silt loam. So these are sort of soil scientists' words for stuff, for dirt. Silt loam would be kind of something that's pretty fine. But whoever did this, they knew that if they had just left the sandy loam, which would be more like a parent material, more like sand that you'd see at the beach, actually the loamy sand, you need to cover that over so that you can stop erosion, right? You can kind of get it so that you won't have the wind blowing it away, you won't make a lot of dust and this and that. So that's loamy sand, which is actually more sand than fine material, and then it's covered over essentially with a topsoil, which I call silt loam. The test pit in the middle was actually sand, and then that's covered over with topsoil. And then the test pit number 3 here was actually sandy loam, which would mean that it has more fines than sand, but that was then covered over with topsoil. So those are the test pits, those are the depths that we found. And again, using those, I came up with the 600 yards of material that appears to have been imported into the site. So with that said, I did receive a letter from Beta on Friday. I think the biggest thing here is that Beta recommended that this slope, which we were showing at 2-to-1, be 3-to-1. Actually, that doesn't really change things much, because if we just pull the slope back about to where we're showing the fence, we can make that a 3-to-1 slope. So that's not an issue. The other issue, as I said, is the filing of the notice of intent, which probably get in this week, be on the September 12th hearing. That's the best I can do. The commission didn't meet in August, so I couldn't get on an August meeting. There's two other issues. So one is the fill. This is actually on the abutter's property. So Joseph actually talked to the abutter, and it's believe it or not, it's the person who lives. Well, you talked to both of them, right? Yeah, some of it's on this person because he owns around like this, and then obviously some of it's on that lot there. And as far as right now, Joseph tells me that these people are willing to allow the fill to stay there. So it's just going to be an administrative issue, whether you need them to sign the application or whether it's just you need some sort of a letter from them saying it's okay for it to stay. So I guess that's something we can work out with the board or with the administration of the board. And then the other one, which is another one that we'll have to work out with somebody, is So you can see this catch basin here, and I know my draftsman didn't label this, but this is a 12-inch drain pipe, which Joseph added about 14 to 16 feet onto the end of it. So, you know, if you just come back 16 feet, so this pipe has always been on this piece of property. So that can create a title issue for him, and it can, you know, sort of create an issue. My advice to Joseph was that we are going to go meet with the DPW and see what needs to be done to work this out. I know Beta had some more sort of physical problems with it, and that is that there's some erosion at the end of it, but I think that there was erosion at the end of it before. It just happened 14 feet more upstream, that's all. Because it's a steep slope, and it's just a pipe with, you know, nothing on the end of it, just no flared end section, no head wall, no riprap, anything. But I think maybe if we can meet with DPW and maybe even meet with Phil and come up with the best way to address this. And my advice out in the hallway to Joe was to just give the town an easement, because you give the town an easement, let it stay there, and you get rid of your title problem, and everybody potentially is happy. So those things, those four things are not going to get resolved tonight. The notice of intent, the fill on the abutted property, the drain pipe, and I didn't have a chance to change the plan to a 3-to-1 slope, but that can be done. So I guess with that, Mr. Chairman, I can answer any questions that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, board members?
I just had a question with regards to stabilization of the fill. What is the current plan for that you guys were thinking?
So we would loam it and seed it, put erosion control blanket over it, and let it.
All the way down, even that 3-to-1 slope? All the way
Yeah,
down?
3-to-1 slope's actually mowable. A 2-to-1 slope, we were gonna loam it and seed it, and then I told Joe that he would have to maintain that with a weed whacker a couple of times a year. But a 3-to-1 slope, you can actually use a lawnmower.
And isn't it, is the property wooded? It seemed, it's a wooded area surrounding it. I was just wondering, where are the trees on that property now?
So, sorry, I'm gonna have to take this again, I guess. So, I did identify, and I think in the application it's wrong. I think the application says 1 tree, but clearly on the plan there's 6 or 7. So here are the trees.
I see.
Okay, so, and then they either say to be removed or to remain. So there's 15-inch, 8-inch, 15-inch, I think they're mostly oaks, 24-inch, 8-inch, and an 8-inch is a couple maples. So there's 5 or 6 trees. They're there now, but they're in the fill. They could stay, but they're probably going to die.
And then going all the way back to the wetlands, there's no trees on that steep slope there?
Oh, no, this is all wooded back
It's
here.
loaded, yeah.
Yeah, but I just was identifying the ones that are going to come down. The rest, nothing's happening between here and the wetlands. There's no more fill to be brought onto this site. I mean, if that's something the board wants to see, I'd be happy to locate the rest of the trees, but.
Did you mention there was a fence on this property?
No. So what I mentioned was that we're showing a fence, which would sort of be the limit of his lawn, but actually now we might revise that, because if we're going to go to a 3-to-1 slope, 3-to-1 slope really isn't all that dangerous. So probably just landscaping at the top of that slope. I mean, there's a fence, I believe there's a fence along the left side somewhat, right? In here? Yeah, there's some wood fences out there, but apparently they're not on the property line. There's no
fence on my property. Thank you. Phil, did you want to say, did you have any comments? sounds like there are a lot of issues to work out here.
Yeah, I think, I talked to Todd about the catch basin. You know, they said it was there before, it was just extended. So I think if we can go out and meet together and figure out a solution for it. So that's not an issue. And obviously, if it's gonna go before the conservation, they'll have their say and talk about, you know, issues related to that. So I think it just clean up the site, and I think the erosion controls need to be at the bottom of the slope. I think either there's migration of the soils or whatever, but just
I think
tighten
it
up
was-
that in the interim.
It was installed too far up.
Yeah,
Should be
so-
deinstalled.
Right, but our plan shows a bigger compost sock and at the limit work at.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, yeah, so, I mean, if they work out the issue of the fill in the adjacent site, I would look to maybe do something along, over the pipe, or make this slope over here, smooth that out
Yeah.
as well. While
Can
you're
you
in
see-
it, might
Can you
as well
see the
s-
connection from the old pipe to the new? Still, or is it covered?
I think that's buried.
It's right there.
Is
So I
it?
didn't bury anything from where the existing pipe daylighted before. It's just a 14-foot extension that can come off of the.
Well, I think as Phil said, though, the best thing probably would be for the DPW, Phil and myself to meet out there. Maybe Joseph can come with us, go look at it. What are we gonna do here, boys? Figure it out and just put that on the plan.
Do you have any other concerns in addition to what Mr. Glosser?
No, I just said, we were just a little curious. We couldn't find the natural heritage line that you were showing on the plan. I didn't know.
It's on Mass GIS, essentially.
Okay.
It's showing on our GIS too.
Is it?
Yeah. And the one thing I was concerned with was the erosion from the pipe because it's so high.
Right, we're gonna provide some
riprap?
sort of protection.
Yeah, if you wanna come along with us, Karen, I think we're probably gonna try to set up a meeting. I think
Okay.
that's the best thing to do, and then we'll just figure it out
So,
and figure out who's gonna take care of what, and we'll take care of it.
so when would we need to continue this until after the conservation
So they're
hearing?
meeting with the commission on September 12th.
So we have a meeting on the 25th,
So that could work.
September 25th.
Seems like more
The
than enough
commission has
time for
already
you
looked
guys
at
to.
this, so, I'm sorry.
Oh,
The
so-
commission's already been out there and looked at it, so,
But you won't rule on anything till the 12th.
no.
You want a final plan? What? I think we'd want a final plan to make the motion on.
Can we get letters out to the abutters?
Yeah, I
It
think-
is their property.
Well, I think the abutters need to sign something agreeing. We want to see something in writing that they agree to let the fill stay there. And we need to know that the fill
You
is not doing any
definitely-
damage.
You definitely want that.
The
Yeah.
commission will want to see that too. So.
Yeah, you definitely either want them to sign the application or want them to give you something notarized,
Yeah.
you know, official, saying, yeah, I'm
So I think it sounds
knowledge
like,
of what it is, and I agree, or else we can be.
Phil, do you
skating
see
on
any
grass.
potential issues with the fill on the abutters' land that would be not applicable to the applicant's land? The danger is whatever it is, it's the same.
Yeah, you know, obviously, we typically want a statement to the fact that, you know, no hazardous waste in the material, you know, whatever.
Right.
If they've done some test bits, that may be more obvious than.
But there's no additional adverse conditions on the abutters' property than would be on the applicant's. The fill doesn't present any different, okay.
And actually, one of the test pits, because when I did the test pits, I didn't really know where the lot lines were, and as I said, if you went out there, you would think just the way Joe did and the way I did, that the lot lines are kind of parallel with the house, but they're not. So test pit number one's actually on the abutters property. And if you want something saying that the fill is not contaminated fill, I would gladly write that and put my stamp on it, because I dug those test pits. I dig a lot of test pits all the time, every week. That was clean fill, and as I said, the bottom, so I'm going to give you a little soils lesson, but you know, you have the material that was left by the glacier, and then over the last 20,000 years or so, you have topsoil and subsoil. When they did this, they have the material down below that looks like, you know, it's good, solid material, sands, and loamy sand, and then above that, they put topsoil to hold it in place and, to provide for grass and that sort of stuff. So there's no problem with the fill at all.
So I think we have some things to work out. It's good that we have this process. It would have been, normally when we have these reviews, it's all about where the truck's going to go. But in this case, late, but it's we have a lot of solutions now for addressing the environmental stuff. So I think we just continue, if someone will make a motion to continue this.
I move we continue this hearing till Tuesday, September 25th, in the Carby Street location in the Champagne Meeting Room, 7 o'clock p.m.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, well, this will be continued until September 25th. And I think, if you need any other details of what we're looking for, you can talk to the town planner. And I think if we have everybody in agreement at that time, we should be able to review this well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have no problem with working with Abby and with Phil and then with the Conservation Commission to get what everybody wants.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so those are our public hearings, and the next item on our agenda, the next few items on the agenda are public safety issues that the planning board has a keen interest in weighing in on for how these items will impact Westwood. And the first one, so in 2017, this board voted unanimously to recommend that Westwood adopt the new 25-mile-an-hour statutory speed limit for business and thickly settled districts. That law was passed 2 years ago. It allows municipalities to opt in to this new statutory limit. They would apply to business and thickly settled districts. And thickly settled is houses are approximately 200 feet apart. The regulatory speed limits are the ones we see with our posted signs, and those are determined based on a process that I think we'll get into. But this particular law would allow for the places that are not posted, that are thickly settled and business, to have a new default of 25 instead of the current default of 30. So we understand that we made that recommendation. And the second item that we're going to consider related to this is that the Pedestrian Bike Safety Committee had recommended that we recommend the selectmen to conduct a speed study so that we can establish a regulatory speed limit on University Ave. There's no speed limit on University Ave right now, and we believe we want to start that process. So those are the items here. We understand the police department had some concerns about the 25-mile-an-hour law, and we invited Sergeant Paul Sicard to come share his experience with us tonight. I just want to say Paul has been a member of the Pedestrian Bike Safety Committee since it was founded, and I want to thank him for his service on that committee and to this community. He's one of the people we go to find out what's really going on out there. So with that, I'd like Paul to tell us more.
Thank you, and if we could, we'll take it in that order, the 25-mile-an-hour one first. Is that okay? So as Chairman said, the state changed the law. Previously and currently, any non-posted street that's thickly settled anywhere in Massachusetts is 30 miles an hour. So when you said there is no speed limit on University Ave, there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's just not a posted regulatory speed limit. And it gets confusing when you talk about the two different ones, but most streets in most towns come under the basic speed law, which is the 30 mile an hour for the thickly settled, 40 for a rural area. That doesn't mean you don't see regulatory signs put up. We're guilty of it. We have some streets in town that are posted with regulatory signs that were never approved. And the thought was it's 30 anyway because it's a thickly settled, they'll put up the 30 mile an hours. So it leads to a little bit of confusion. So since the change of that law, there have been some towns and cities that have adopted it. Out of the 351 communities in the state, there were 16 cities that have adopted it and 14 towns that have adopted the citywide or townwide 25 mile an hour speed limit. There's two sections of the law. You can adopt it townwide, or you can go street by street and say, you know what, we're going to keep the 30 mile an hour, but this particular neighborhood street is such a small neighborhood street, we'd like the 25 on that. There's 4 towns that have gone the street-by-street route. And part of the confusion on both sides is it's going to create confusion with motorists. At least with the 30 mile an hour statewide, everybody knows if they're on a street and they don't see a speed limit, it's 30 miles an hour. Now, you're going to have to remember, when I came into the town, did I see one of these new speed limit signs? If anybody's traveled into Dedham recently, Dedham's the only bordering town of ours that has adopted it. And at each entrance to town, you have to post one of these new speed limit signs. It actually, I don't like it. It looks like a school zone sign. It looks very similar. It has the yellow section at the top. And it says townwide speed limit 25 miles an hour unless otherwise posted. A good example is right at Gay Street and Wash. There's one there. And where I think some of the confusion comes up is you have that sign, and then about maybe 50 feet in front of it, there's a 40 mile an hour speed limit sign. Because Washington Street isn't covered by the law because it already has a posted speed limit. And most of the entrances to town are gonna have posted speed limits. So you're gonna be posting these townwide signs. I wish it was more of just an advisory sign and didn't look like the speed limit signs, but that's what the state went with. So I have a couple of concerns. Number one is it would make much more sense if they did it statewide, so motorists understood all the way around. The biggest concern is that most of the, and I'm not a traffic engineer, and hopefully somebody can pipe up if I make a slip up here, but most of the studies show that the posted speed limit doesn't affect the speed at which traffic travels. Most people drive at a speed they feel comfortable. And not using traffic studies, an example that I like to use is Winter Street. As you're coming from Norwood, as you come by the cemetery, it's a really wide road with a full parking lane on either side, and it's posted as 30 miles an hour. I do a lot of radar down on Winter Street by the town line, so I see the cars coming from Norwood are frequently in the high 40s, low 50s, coming through there, down past the entrance to the dump and the cemetery. As you approach Westwood, the road narrows way down, and the speed limit is posted, it's a regulatory posted at 35. And you would think, if you go with that, well, how you post the speed limit is going to affect people's speeds, you'd expect the speeds to go up. Well, they don't. They drop drastically as you come into Westwood. And the reason why is because of the narrowness of the road. People don't feel comfortable going 50 down Winter Street in Westwood, so they slow down to a speed they feel comfortable. And that's the way most roads work. People drive at a speed they feel comfortable at. And so raising and lowering the speed limits, and there has been some studies. There's one that, at least in the police field, that we refer back to a lot, that was done way back in 1997, but it was done in 22 states, over 100 roads. They raised speed limits in 5 mile an hour, 10 mile, and 15 mile an hour increments over the existing speed limits. And then in other streets, they lowered them 5, 10, and 15 miles an hour lower. And they found even on the streets where they put huge changes in the speed limits, it was basically 2 miles an hour was the change in the average speeds, between 1.5 and 2 miles an hour. So you're not going to get a huge drop in speed by posting a 25 mile town-wide speed limit. Will some people drive 25? Yes. But most people are going to continue driving at a speed they feel comfortable. The other place, anecdotally, that we see this is when they put up construction zone speed limits. When they're doing work on a street, they'll throw up a 20, 25, 15 mile an hour, even sometimes speed limit. People don't come along, see the 15, and drop it down to 15. They drive at a speed they feel comfortable. If there's construction barrels and signs and holes in the road, they slow down. If it's later at night and there's nobody out there, they drive by at the regular speed. So one of my concerns is what happens if you do drop the speed limit to 25. It doesn't necessarily change the speeds. What it does do is it raises the fines. So speed limit fines in Massachusetts are based on the speed over the speed limit that you're going. So all speeds would jump $50. Doesn't seem like a lot, but most speeding tickets are $150 to $200 in that range. So you're raising it another $50, and then you have the surcharges on the insurance. One of the things that we've seen happen, because when I started, all speeding tickets were $50. And they said, well, that's not right. If you're going way over, it should be higher. So they came up with this incremented speed limit. One of the problems we saw was a lot of officers stopped writing speeding tickets. or only wrote them for really outrageous violations. Because it's real hard to whack a soccer mom going to drop the kids off at practice a $250 speeding ticket that's going to increase the insurance for 6 years as a surcharge. That's a pretty hefty fine. So one of the things that you see sometimes is when the fines go up, which is basically what dropping the speed limit to 25 would do, it would bump the fines up by $50. You could see, and I'm not saying you would, but you could see a drop in the number in the enforcement. We did see that with the junior operator law. They really clamped down on the fines for junior operators. First fine, you lose your first speeding ticket. If you're under 18, you lose your license. You have to take 2 $500 classes in order to get it back and pay a $500 reinstatement fee to go along with the license suspension, plus the original fine and the surcharges. I was at a meeting with the registry and they were singing the praises of the junior operators law, how great it is because the fines have basically disappeared. The kids aren't speeding anymore. And it kind of broke their heart when I explained to them that, well, no, people are doing it, but it's very difficult to whack somebody with that huge of a fine when you compare what fines are for other things. So that is a slight concern. And I just was on vacation last week in Maine, and the state in Maine actually just voted to lower a lot of their speeding fines. And it was for that very reason. They found that they were out of whack for neighboring states and stuff, and they found that when they raised them up in hoping that it was going to cause people to go slower, what they found is that officers stopped writing the tickets, and once the motoring public realized they were less likely to get a ticket, speeds actually went higher. Why? Because we're back to the original. They felt comfortable going faster at that speed. So I'm not against the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit at all. I think it just needs a little more time to see how it's going to play out. And as I said, right now, Dedham's the only one that has adopted it next to us. I live in Walpole. Walpole just voted it down. They have a representative town meeting, but they voted it down, and there was a lot of concern because 25 miles an hour is very slow. And I'm not saying it's not appropriate on some streets, but when you take some other roads that are not posted and, you know, driving 25 would be slow. And one of the other issues that can happen with changes in speed limits is if slower is always safer in people's minds, which makes sense, think about it. If you were to drive 35 miles an hour down 128, is that going to make things safer? Probably not, because people are going to be flying up, trying to pass you, trying to get around you. So part of the goal in traffic engineering, I believe, is to get people driving at a consistent speed that is safe. And that's what I would like to see. And I'm not sure just arbitrarily lowering everything to 25 is the best idea.
Well, wouldn't this apply only to the unmarked neighborhood streets?
It would apply to any unpermitted street. So there are some streets right now that are marked that are not legally marked, so they would drop to 25.
How would we know which?
I have a list of all the streets. So like Clabo Tree Street does not have a permitted speed limit. So it's posted as 30 right now because it's thickly settled. So Clabo Tree Street would drop to 25, which is a narrow road, but even Clabo Tree Street I think would be a difficult road to drive 25 on a regular basis.
Is it up to the driver to determine if they're in a thickly settled area?
Yes, it is.
How, but it's
200
feet.
Yeah. Basically, most streets in Westwood, with the exception of a portion of Gay Street, would be thickly settled. The town can, and we have on some streets, put up advisory speed limits to remind people that it's a thickly settled roadway with the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, and that's not a problem. And I wouldn't have a problem, you know, on a street-by-street basis, which is a lot of work, but on a street-by-street basis, if the town were to go that route, because then it would be streets that are appropriate to go 25 on, and that particular street would be posted as 25. As opposed to, you drive into, pick any town. You drive into Dover, and you go down a street, and say the one sign that's at Hartford Street at the town line that warns you that it's now 25 and a thickly settled, if that sign got knocked over and hasn't been put back up again, you as a driver are going to be responsible for knowing that all their streets are 25, not 30, which is why it really should have been done on a statewide basis as opposed to town by town.
So as the safety officer, your concern doesn't sound like it's safety so much, it's gonna create confusion by motorists, and it's really not gonna do anything to change how they drive.
Which can lead to safety.
Yeah.
When you've got people driving, you will have some people who will drive 25 because it is 25. You're going to have other people that are currently used to driving 30, 35, because that's how they feel comfortable, that are still going to drive that, but they're going to be coming up behind the people that are driving 25, and that is not always the safest
That
situation.
gets back to the confusion of,
The confusion of what is the appropriate
what
speed.
can I
And that's
drive
why when speed limits are posted, they're not posted at what the resident wants or what the selectmen want. It's posted at what the traffic engineering studies show is the 85th percentile. What 85% of the traffic travels at or lower is what they set the speed limit at, not what the people want it to be set at. Because it needs to be based on something and something scientific. And when they do that, the reasoning is if most of the traffic travels at that speed without a problem, and it can be changed if you have a bad traffic accident history at that location, if there's something real, a sharp hairpin turn, it can be lowered from the 85th percentile, but the starting point is the 85th percentile. And I would venture to guess very few of the streets in Westwood have an 85th percentile of 25.
Well, that's, again, I'm thinking of the neighborhood streets, like Parker Street, Webster, Cobley, all the streets in the maze. Those are, you can't drive 30 miles an hour on those streets. So I would say that if you actually did a speed study on all those streets, you're going to find it's lower.
Right.
But it's by default 30. So why not just adopt the default law and recognize that these neighborhood streets, are going to be lower?
Again, if it was a street like that, I have no problem with that.
But you're saying that there's like Clabber Tree and many of the streets that are posted with signs now would, upon adoption of this law, those signs would have to be removed?
Because they're not legally posted.
So you'd have to do speed studies
Right.
on the streets that
On
were
the-
fast,
on all those
so that we
streets.
could raise the speed limit.
And it will be whatever the 85th percentile comes in at. So as an example, Blue Hill Drive was the most recent. We haven't done very many posted speed limits in town. Most of them were done back in 1956. And High Street, East Street, all those were all done, Washington Street, those were all done in 56. But in 2000, we did Blue Hill Drive. And sections of it were 50 originally, because it used to be a state roadway, and when the town took it over. And up towards the end, towards Canton Street, was 30. So when we did the speed surveys up there, it came up with 45 for the lower section and 35 for the upper section. So the speed limit went up from 30 to 35. So, just running out and doing a speed survey is fine, but it's not always what people, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be posted at that, but that's, a lot of times it's very hard sell to the residents when you're telling them you're bumping the speed limit up by 5 miles an hour. That it's a difficult sell. And you can't pick and choose. You can't say, oh, we did the speed survey, we don't like the results, we're not gonna go forward. Because the first step is to ask the state for permission to do the speed survey. So they already have it on record that you've asked for it. At some point, you have to follow through and present them with the data and what the speed limit's gonna be.
Have any other questions or?
How many speeding tickets are given out a month?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer for it.
Because the reason why I ask is to get to your point about maybe some of the officers handing out fewer, but if it's already low, I wouldn't be as concerned about a
Yeah,
drop.
no, I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to what it is.
Yeah.
I don't want to just throw a number
what
out
would be
there.
considered low versus high. It'd be hard to even use that for me to even understand what
Right.
I need a.
I'm curious to know what the number is.
Yeah, I can find out and get
And
that.
then can you get us a list of those roadways where it's marked, but
Well, I can run through real quickly if you want this, where we have posted speed limits, and it would be any street that's not on this list. So Blue Hill Drive, Canton Street, Dover Road, East Street, Everett, Gay, Hartford, High Street, Nahatan, Oak Street, Pond Street, Summer Street, and Winter Street are the legal permitted speed limits. So any street that's not on that list.
So Washington Street, was that?
Washington Street wasn't on the list because that was a state highway when it was done, but Washington Street is permitted by the state.
It's a short list.
It's a very short list, yeah.
All
So,
the others would be,
But those are the major roads.
those are the major roads, but there's Fox Hill Street would be 25, which I'm sure the people on Fox Hill Street would be, would be thrilled with, but, and that's, you know, that's one of the concerns. It's not just your town, but as other towns adopt this, be ready to be driving 25 miles an hour or face a ticket. And, you know, and again, it kind of leads to the, like, you can put up a sign that says, you know, strictly enforced and stuff like that. It doesn't mean anything to the motoring public unless it actually is strictly enforced. And very few places around here have the manpower to strictly enforce speed limits.
and your number said about 10% of the communities in the state?
Yeah, there's about 10% have adopted.
2 years?
Yeah. And so around us, we have Dedham, Randolph, and Newton are the nearby ones. And
They all have their own traffic division to all of those towns.
yes, I know Randolph and Newton do.
Dedham does.
Dedham has a three-man traffic unit, yes.
So they have the manpower.
Let's see, did anyone else want to ask any questions about this issue? If you could come up to the podium. Thank you, Paul.
Try driving up to
20. Take me a while.
That's from Rowdy.
Nada Milosavljevic, Fabrizio, 32 Webster Street. Officer Saccard, hello. I have a question. When I go down Gay Street towards 109, and I get right before, what is it, that street Deerfield, where that's posted 25. Is that a legal sign?
Yes.
So you're telling me that if I do 35, I won't get stopped and get a ticket?
Probably not, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because to stop people from going over 25 on that stretch is ridiculous. It was done back when when the roadway was different. Gay Street at 40 was really wide open with no houses on it, and it went into the center of town, so it dropped to 25.
But that's a legal sign.
Yep, that's one of the posted ones.
Okay.
And that's a perfect example. People
Thank
don't
you.
drive 25 there because it's posted. as 25.
I do, because it's posted. And I have everybody up my butt when they're behind me.
And that's where the
Thank you.
So so you're saying that is that one of the ones that no speed study was done for that? It was just,
No, that's legally posted.
It
There
is
was a
ille-
speed
so
study. That was in 1956.
okay.
So things were a little different back then. Yeah, 1956. And it drops to 25. So other states do it differently. Like Bob Haas, who was our chief for a while, he came from New Jersey. In New Jersey, every time you do modifications to a roadway, you have to go back and do a speed survey and post the road appropriately. Massachusetts has always been different. And some towns just run around and throw up whatever they want for speed limits. You go through some towns and they have 25-mile-an-hour speed limits. Canton, coming down Dedham Street, they have 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs there. It really means nothing. So, you know, I'd rather post a legitimate speed limit that people can try to obey. And that's my feeling. And again, for neighborhoods, I had the speed sign out on Locust the other day, and the highest speed in the 3 weeks that we had on that was, I think, 22 miles an hour. So would it hurt to put a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign there? No. But by the same token, it's not going to change anything either.
Is it necessary?
All right. Are there any other on this? I know we have a second issue, but
No, it's all right.
Hi, Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane, Officer Saccard. I happen to notice on Gay Street, there's a large disparity with the speed limits. It goes up and down probably 4 times. And especially down towards High Street, it's posted at 25. Why wouldn't it be posted at 25 at the other end, closer to Washington Street? Especially since there's a school there and it's more thickly settled than it is towards High Street.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And without going into the whole process of establishing speed limits, so back in 1956 when this was done, they do a number of different tests. Besides just taking speed counts, they do test runs with cars. So there actually has to be one person driving and one person recording the speeds as you drive the length of the road at what the driver feels is a comfortable speed. You do speed counts with radar, and you can also do speed counts with the tubes, but for the state, you actually have to do physical radar counts of counting the cars. And the speeds when it was done at the Westwood end were lower, so that's why the speed limit got set at 25. At the other end, they were higher, and that's why it goes up and down. It's not one speed for the entire length of the street when you establish a speed limit. You have to do different intervals along the roadway and go with that 85th percentile along that stretch of the road, which is one of the other downsides of doing a speed survey, is that you're going to have changes of the speed limit. Whereas if you stick with thickly settled, it's 30 for the whole length, which I think for the motorist is a little easier to understand. Oh, sorry. Sure. No, Dave's got to go.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah, you can go. Yeah, did you want to? Yeah.
Oh, sure. I just got a couple comments. Hi, I'm Steve Botello of 2 Summer Street. I serve on the Pedestrian Bike Safety Committee, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee right now. I'm just speaking as a concerned citizen. I just got a couple comments. I agree with Paul. It really doesn't matter what you post for signs. It doesn't seem to be much of a deterrent for most drivers. They'll just drive as fast as their cars will physically allow them to go. My house is right on the corner of Summer and High Street, and it faces High Street, and it's posted at 30. Cars don't do 30 on High Street. They just don't. They just go as fast as they need to go. And I agree that strict enforcement is really the only deterrent. And I definitely appreciate the the hefty fines, and it's a bit of a discouraging thing to hand out a hefty fine. But what about written warnings? Is that used at all?
I would say, and again, this is just a ballpark figure, but I would say about 75% of our tickets for speeding are written warnings as opposed to money tickets.
So you feel comfortable passing out written warnings?
Right. I think anybody.
You feel it's effective? You see a repeat of those coming back at all?
It depends.
Yeah.
I wrote a woman the other day from Westwood who was offended that I wrote her a money ticket, but she'd had 7 previous written warnings over the years. So, you know.
Yeah. Can only try so hard. All right, thank you.
It works for some people.
All right, the second issue is the establishing a speed limit on University Ave. Did you want to?
Okay, so as I said before, right now University Ave would be 30 mile an hour as a thickly settled area. I could live with 30 miles an hour, maybe probably should be a little bit higher where it's 2 lanes in each direction. So we could do a speed survey for that and have, a determination as to what the speed limit should be on that stretch of road. I think 35 would be appropriate and probably what you'd wind up seeing. We see some 50s down there, but 35 would probably be what you'd wind up with as an 85th percentile, and that's just a guess from my observations. The question that comes up is, when do you do it? We could do it now and then redo it after the off-ramp and stuff are completed, if that ever happens. I know the state doesn't suggest that you do speed surveys when there's active construction going on. And we still have that one stretch by the railroad tracks, which hasn't been completed yet, of the roadway where it narrows down right at the railroad tracks. And then when you get up to Canton Street, but it's only at the very end, you have the lanes that are closed by the construction barrels. So ideally, you would wait until everything's done. When that's going to happen, I'm not really sure.
So do you think, what is your recommendation on that then? I guess we're looking for the right time to.
Yeah, I mean, if you wait until everything's done, it's going to be a long time. I think there are some current, physical restrictions that won't be in place when the roadway's finally done, but I think it's minor. I don't think it would be that different of a result now as later. So I wouldn't have a problem doing it now. And then if somebody felt later that that was too low because it was artificial, they could do it again at that point.
Because that ramp's not fully funded now anyway.
All right, well, we have a recommendation from the Ped Bike Safety Committee to recommend that the selectmen start that process, so maybe we should have a motion as to whether we endorse that recommendation.
At University.
At University Ave. Because I think, like, at our last meeting, we kind of talked about stuff and all, but I want to bring, for these issues, we should kind of make a decision and move on. So We have that recommendation from the Ped Bike Committee, and would someone like to make a motion to?
Is that number 30 from the Ped Bike Committee? Is that what we said? Or 25?
Study. So for university to have the study.
To establish.
My apologies.
Yeah.
To establish the.
From 30 to 35.
But it would be the study that would,
Set an established
Yeah.
speed limit for University Ave.
Good job.
yeah, I make a motion that, that we recommend a speed limit study for University Ave.
The construction on the bridge is gonna be another couple of years.
I don't even think it's fully funded yet.
Yeah.
It's got the green light, but there's no money for it today. That's my understanding.
No, I think it is. I think it was like 50-some $million they found in the cushions
Okay.
up at State House.
Okay.
It was the other one that they were unable to fund, the big interchange.
Got it. That's right. That's right.
That's like 250 million. That was like 4 years ago. That was 250. No, I think that's why they're doing what they're doing on Canton Street is to prepare for the additional traffic. Once they finish that, they have, 3 bridges to fix? Over the train, over the river, and over the highway, and then they'll make the off-ramp, however that's gonna be designed. But it's gonna take forever, so if we think this needs to be done, we should do it now, and then revisit it. I don't know what the cost is to do this, but going the other way, I don't see any impediments going from Canton Street to Amtrak. I don't see any reason why that would be changed. Once you get on University, there's nothing.
Right.
Every lane is open that's built. So that would be at least a fair indication of what the traffic should be. But on the other side, it's really only when you come up to the stop sign, as Officer Sicard mentioned, where the barrels are, you're stopping prematurely, which means your speed might be affected, at least by that light by lifetime. I haven't seen traffic back beyond that light before, but after that light, I think it would be skewed for the additional cars backed up there. But if we think it's important, and I think it should be looked at. And I mean, waiting for the state to finish a project, that's like saying, let's not do it.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Opposed?
So I have a nay. We have a 4-to-1 vote. And the motion passes. So thank you again, Officer Sicard. The next item on the agenda is an update on the townwide crosswalk evaluation. And we have our DPW Director, Todd Korchin, here to tell us about this. Actually, just a little background.
So the Department of Public Works decided to be proactive and embark on a townwide crosswalk evaluation and study. There's really little to report on as far as where the study stands right now. We're expected to meet with Beta Group, who's the consultant that we had hired to do the evaluation. We're probably going to meet with them early fall. At that point, after we meet with them, we'll probably present our findings to the Board of Selectmen and then probably come before the Planning Board with what Beta has come up with. The premise of the study itself is to look at approximately 115 crosswalks throughout town and assess them each from safety considerations primarily. Look at each crosswalk, see if we can develop some sort of a capital program based on the recommendations that come in throughout the study. Some of them might include enhancements, signage, painting, structural enhancements. To be honest with you, I really don't know the extent of what locations would require what as of right now. But the talks that we have had thus far with how I'd like to approach this is from a tiered level and tier each, take segments of town or segments of crosswalks based on what Beta's recommendation is of urgency levels of things that the town should address. So unfortunately, that's all I really have on that at this point. But like I said, we are being proactive like we are with several projects that we do take on. I think this is going to be a great study. I think it's going to provide a thorough report on every single crosswalk in town, and I think it's going to be able to give us a good indication of where we need to be from a capital perspective that I can then present before the Board of Selectmen, Financial Commission, Pam, Mike, etc. And it's my hopes that at some point, potentially this coming Springtown meeting, 2019, that we could possibly, propose some of the options that have come forward. So.
Well,
Can you explain the criteria for tiering? What you would see, like, safety or
Sure, I
easy
think,
fix or what?
Not so much easy fix. I like to look at it from a standpoint of, what's out there right now existing infrastructurally and not, maybe not, we think infrastructurally, like how is it built, but maybe it's painting, maybe it's signage, but I look at it from a level of sense of urgency. These crosswalks have been in town for years and years. There might be some crosswalks that, we could eliminate, some crosswalks that we could say, wow, this, advanced signage here might be better. I think that's where I lean heavily on the consultants at this point. They're the experts, and see what they have to say and what they would recommend us doing. And then obviously approaching it, it's costly. Several times people come in and say, oh, we love those crosswalk signs that you push the button and they light up, and some of them have the speed limit signs, and just put a few of those up. But the reality is they're about $30,000 a piece, so a few of those takes up a good chunk of capital funding. So I think that's a big premise of this study as well, is to really take a look at everything, tier it from a sense of urgency, obviously, safety standpoint, obviously, and financially, how can we as a town afford to do what we should be doing out there, and put that together as like a capital replacement program that we do with our roadways, with our equipment, and obviously our infrastructure.
Thanks.
Anybody else have board members' questions?
Oh, you just, is from a timeline standpoint, when do you expect to have that initial report that would have that information?
I will have the draft report probably early fall.
Okay.
At that point, I'll sit down. We'll have a couple meetings with Beta just to kind of go over everything, fine-tune it up a little bit. Then I'll present those findings to the Board of Selectmen, and then I'll come before the Planning Board as well at that point. And I'll have Beta here, obviously, to do the presentation and kind of go over our findings and give you guys a timeline as far as what our next steps will be at that point.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm very encouraged by this, because this all came out of, we were all talking about, there had been a terrible accident in town in a crosswalk, and what everybody wanted to do something about it. And the approach here has been to study all the crosswalks and approach this with a methodical thing. So I hope also, if we do identify really serious things in the next few months, you could probably, if there's something glaring, maybe that could be addressed immediately or something.
Sure.
Maybe we would accelerate some of that, or. But we will really have at the end of this process, we have a comprehensive evaluation, which is something, instead of it being sort of piecemeal of like, oh, I think this one needs to be done or that one needs to be done. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah, it's one of our, how we operate with Public Works. I like to go all in and, get the study completed. And that was the question, can we do this? Can we kind of do like half the sidewalks now and the other half later? And it was my mindset that let's just go all in with this, utilize some funding that we had and opportunities that we had. And fortunately, we were able to absorb all of it. And like you said, the study will be pretty advanced and thorough with every single location in town, so. Good.
All right, are there any other comments? Anybody in the public wants to comment? Thank you, Todd.
Hi, Nada Fabrizio, 32 Webster Street. My question is, you said elimination of crosswalks. I have a neighbor on Dean Street that prepared a petition that approximately 50 residents have signed. I don't know what happened to that petition, but it specifically relates to the crosswalk at Dean and Washington that I think 2 years ago I had a problem crossing. And when I spoke with Mike and Paul, I was told that both of you were totally against that crosswalk at that intersection. And the reasoning was, when you're coming from Norwood into Westwood, and you're stopped at that red light at the fire station, the new fire station, When that light changes, people want to floor it, and they just want to go down Washington Street. And I feel, along with many, many other residents, we need to cater to the residents and the pedestrians and the bicyclists in this town, not to the motorists. I feel that people that drive through town are in a rush to get to the next red light. I'm a pedestrian, I'm a motorist, I show courtesy to side street traffic. I let people cross the street. I have people passing me on my right on Washington Street after going through the Gay Street red light, and it's crazy. And I feel that the elimination of crosswalks needs to be done very, very carefully. And that crosswalk, people want that crosswalk there. And again, we need to make sure that the residents are safe, not to get the traffic through the town. And that's my comment. And that petition will be presented. I don't know who has it, but it's coming up because residents don't want to lose that crosswalk. And I'm talking on behalf of Rob Tempesta, who's not here because he works nights. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, if I could just make a quick comment on that. At least my understanding is any ones that they'd be looking to take out is due to safety. And there's often a misconception that if people have a hard time crossing somewhere, put a crosswalk and it'll make it safe for them to cross. And that is clearly not the case. And, you know, Mike and I, we've had to go around with the selectmen a few times on issues like this, but there are a couple crosswalks that I've seen in town, and I'll use one as an example. As you come up Pond Street and you turn left onto Oak, there's a crosswalk that goes across Oak Street, and then about 15 or 20 feet in, there's another crosswalk. And I think that was put in because it's a shorter distance to cross, but people who are waiting to turn left onto Oak Street, they finally get a break in traffic, they go to turn, they're not expecting to stop again that short. The one at Dean Street is plenty far away from the traffic light. It's a concern, but I don't think it's one that they'd be looking, I don't know, I haven't seen the study, but I personally don't think that's one they'd be looking to remove, because I don't think it's a hazard as it is. And that's the ones they'd be looking to eliminate, is if it's in a very dangerous spot, and we're telling pedestrians, this is a good place to cross, the town has to consider safety.
Right, I think it's the thing people say is that the paint alone doesn't make it safe. So either we make it safe or it can't be made safe.
Right, and I don't want things taken out of context either. I think Paul said it great, that the study is based on pedestrian safety. We're not looking to just say, let's remove crosswalks to enhance vehicular travel. That's not the purpose of this by any means. But like Paul had mentioned, there might be a crosswalk or two in town which aren't safe for a pedestrian, so.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Todd. Any other, Mike?
I just want to make a statement that.
You can use the microphones.
It was insinuated that I would oppose a crosswalk for it being in favor of the residents traveling through town. That's not in fact the case. Just like Paul said, we both weighed in on the Dean Street sidewalk. It's all about, you're not going to change what the drivers of the car are going to do just because you paint a crosswalk. But what you're going to do by doing that is you're going to indicate to the residents, the pedestrians, that it's safe to cross at that location. God forbid somebody is hit in the intersection because we have an illusion that everybody's going to stop at a stop sign because that's the law, or a crosswalk because that's the law. That doesn't happen. So we were in particular agreement, the engineer as well, that we thought that was an unsafe sidewalk at the time. We were overridden. It got in. It's there. We haven't had, God forbid, an accident. Hopefully never will. But that was why we did it. It wasn't to accommodate the motorists. It was to protect the safety of the residents and the pedestrians that are crossing.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Todd, did you have something else to?
No, unless you guys have any further questions.
Okay. I think that's, Ms. Fusco, did you want to?
Hi, Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. I have a comment as far as the crosswalks and pedestrians have the right of way. I know coming in through Norwood, right in the middle of town, there's numerous amounts of crosswalks, and there are signs posted that, I don't know the exact wording, but that you have to stop for pedestrians in crosswalks. I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen that in Westwood. Might be something to think about, because I know it's thickly settled in that area, but I mean, there's parts of Westwood like Dean Street where it's, busy with traffic. But people literally are hopping right off that curb and going. And I know myself, I take heed to stopping and allowing them to cross. So.
Just a couple quick things on that. We did have yield to pedestrian and crosswalk signs, the ones that go in the center of the road. We did have those at a number of intersections. I bought them through a highway traffic safety grant that we had. When the money ran out, I don't think there was a big push from anybody for the town to come up with funding to buy them. They can have some effectiveness. One of the downsides is after they get hit once or twice, they look awful. And I know that shouldn't be a major concern, but it is, because we hear about it, the selectman's office hear about it. People don't want that in their neighborhood, when it's got the black marks after being hit once or twice. One of the problems that we have with them is most of the crosswalks where people want them are near corners, and when the landscape trucks come around the corner with the trailers, they knock them down. So they can have some effectiveness, and that may be part of what Beta's looking at. But the one thing I did want to just clarify, and I hate to harp on this stuff, but a lot of people don't understand that in Massachusetts, the motorists only have to yield to somebody who's in the crosswalk. There is no law that you have to stop or slow down or anything for somebody who's waiting to cross. They have to be in the crosswalk. So the idea behind it is the pedestrian is supposed to wait until there's a safe time to cross and then step out into the crosswalk. And then when they're in the crosswalk, the cars that are coming in their lane are supposed to yield to them. And I think it's 8 feet. If you're within 8 feet of the center line, then the people coming the other way have to yield. So theoretically, if you take like St. Margaret Mary's and you're crossing from the middle school side, cars that are going towards Medfield don't have to yield to you until you're basically on the island in the middle, under the law. And I know that because I wrote a lawyer when I first got on for failing to yield to somebody up at the middle school. And I learned the lesson from the judge and the lawyer that people don't have to stop just because you're waiting on the side of the road.
Thank you. Yes, it definitely, this morning I was almost, I had a couple of crosswalk frightening experiences, one crossing Dean Avenue and one crossing at St. Denis. So you gotta step out and then sometimes wait for 10 or 15 cars before someone will stop. But Todd, so the process will be after this, there'll be a report to the Pedestrian and Bike Safety Committee first, or Selectmen, or kind of what, again?
More than likely, we'll go before the Board of Selectmen first. Then we'll come before, as a member of the Pedestrian Bicycle Committee, he'll come in probably with Beta, give the presentation to the Bike Committee, perhaps the Planning Board, and just solicit some feedback. And like I said, a lot of it's going to be driven, what our financial obligation is going to be at that point, and how can we structure it as a capital program and move forward in that manner. So.
And I would just put out a pitch for the Pedestrian and Bike Committee, like anyone is welcome to go to the committee meetings. So they're usually the fourth Thursday of each month.
Sure.
And these kinds of issues are discussed, and it's a great way to learn more about all the details to get into. So.
Sure. Just on a quick last note, from funding mechanisms too, that we obviously have the Complete Streets program. There might be other outside opportunities once we develop this capital program to fund some of these recommendations. So it might not have to be all inherited through the town's resources, that we can go outside with some state funding potentially too. So we have some plans in place, but I'm just eager to get my hands on the study and then see what those recommendations are. So.
All right. Thank you very much,
Welcome.
Todd. The next item on our agenda is a review of proposed Gay Street sidewalk design from TEC and Public Works. So again, Todd will be
didn't go anywhere, so
not going anywhere.
I'll keep my little spiel pretty quick here. I know we've been here for a while. Basically, we're embedded into our design work right now. We're at about a 30% benchmark. We had a public hearing and went before the Board of Selectmen following that hearing. Got some good feedback, and I have Mike Myers here from TEC. Just a quick background on Mike. He's done a lot of work in town. He started doing the Safe Routes to School project, the Downey School project that we had years ago, and has since been a huge asset to the town with respect to our Complete Streets program. We received 2 grants, obviously, you guys know that, various projects throughout town. So Mike has taken on this important task of the Gay Street sidewalk. And again, we're at a 30% design, and Mike's here to just give a brief overview and kind of hear your comments and feedback. So to that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Hi, good evening. Mike Myers from TEC. I believe a lot of you have seen the PowerPoint. Do you want me to go through that quickly, or?
I think we've actually seen it several times.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that in particular, we're interested in the idea of the stone walls and what to do with how to deal with a suggestion to come up to consider having parts of the path be running behind the stone walls. And I know
Sure.
we've looked at kind of what would that really entail. So we have kind of a map of down the entire street. I also, if you could launch the Chrome browser there, at the last Selectmen's meeting, some of us spoke about this, and I thought I had that set up already, but I wanted to, there was a question about what this meant, like having paths behind the stone walls, and they're talking about sidewalks versus paths and everything. And I have some pictures, some photographs that illustrate what the town of Lincoln has done. Let's see. Sorry. If you could just click on the first one of those, or the slideshow. Not that. So that's the
That's what I
current
thought you
side,
meant.
the new sidewalk on Crosswalk Street. But just any one of these pictures. So I mean, this is just an example up in Lincoln of how there's a path with a stone wall and a street, and you could click on the advance arrow.
All the way to the right.
To the right.
Where is it on?
Oh, the middle right.
Middle, right.
Middle of the page on
Oh,
the
yeah, I
right.
see him.
There
Yeah,
it is,
right
yep.
there. So we can just kind of quickly click through a couple of these. I just wanted to illustrate how the concept. And you can click again for. And just advance to another one. So I mean, there's just some examples of how in a very rural setting, there's a path with stone walls and a street. And that's kind of when I had thought about this idea, that was what I had in my mind. I don't know if is that possible in Westwood and some sections of Gay Street, and so we would not be talking about like a white concrete sidewalk across someone's yard, but is there a way to create this kind of experience in Westwood as a part of this project?
Sure. So when we met with the public, it was our third informational meeting in June. We had presented a recommended alternative, and which showed the sidewalk along the edge of the road for the entire corridor. A couple of reasons for that. One was at the first 2 public informational meetings, one of the largest concerns from the residents and community were making sure we preserve the stone walls and we weren't moving the stone walls. The stone walls also typically represent the property line for the abutters. So we did show the sidewalk on the inside. Then we heard from some of the folks at that meeting in June to take a look at that and look for those opportunities to go behind the wall. And there's certainly some great benefits to that, safety benefits, aesthetics. But there are challenges on Gay Street as it relates to right-of-way. Again, that wall not every place along Gay Street, but generally depicts the property line. And it's historic, it's been there for years, and that's how they determined the property lines back in the day. So then when we met with the Board of Selectmen, and coming out of that meeting, we came up with, worked with Todd to come up with a list of, all right, where might this be feasible? We looked at, there's about 40 properties along the north side. So we took a look at all those properties, and there's quite a few you can rule out right away. The house is set pretty close to the road. So those were areas we wouldn't look to put the sidewalk on somebody's property. Wetlands come right up to the stone wall. We go behind the stone wall. We're then in the wetlands. And there's a couple properties with a conservation restriction. And then anywhere you saw a steep slope, whether it was a fill or a cut slope up, we ruled some of those areas out. And we were able to come up with a list of 9 properties, in which Todd's been working to try and connect with those property owners to see if it would be possible to go behind the wall and on private property, which would ultimately need to require eminent domain land taking. So Todd has started that coordination with the abutters. So far, connected with one that said it would be okay to look at the opportunities there. 1, 2, 3, 4 that said no, and then still waiting to hear back from another 4. But we also have this area that's actually up on screen here, where there is an existing easement that's in place across number 5 and number 7 Fox Meadow Drive. And it's about 750 feet. So it's about 10% on the project. But in this area here, because that easement is in place, we're able to do the sidewalk behind the wall in this location. So at this point, we've got about 750 feet here. There's another area that's about 300 feet. So that'd be about 1,000 feet. Where we know at this point, we could potentially put the sidewalk behind the wall. And then out of those 4 properties, there's about 850 feet of potential sidewalk that we could be looking at if we get permission from those abutters.
And how many of, what's the lineal feet of the no's that you got? The people that said no, not going to happen.
Of the no's? Yeah, maybe another 1,000-ish, yeah. And the court is about 7,500 feet from High Street to Pine Lane.
Do you consider it worth it at this point, knowing what you know today?
In this area, yes, absolutely, because the easement's in place. It definitely makes sense here. Looking at a couple of the other properties that are still pending, there's still more things we'd have to look at. Just because they say yes, we're going behind the wall, there's potential for significant clearing behind the wall in some of those locations. In my opinion, this area, yes. There's not a lot of other opportunities along the corridor to get continuity. It's little bite-sized chunks here and there, which could become confusing to people.
Is it worth wasting, I don't want to say wasting time. I'd love to see this the entire length of Gay Street like that. It's just not possible. So at what point do we give up the idea and go ahead with the idea of running a sidewalk down Gay Street and actually getting it done?
I think at this point, just completing trying to make the connection with those abutters, which was, the direction we got from the selectmen to go out and reach out to them, go through that process, and then we'll take a look at, how many yeses there were and see if it makes sense.
Thank you.
So what would in the situation where it's the regular sidewalk, is that going to look like the end of Clapboard Street? Or is there going to be a space between the sidewalk and the stone walls, or kind of what, do you have any visual?
Yeah, so at this point, this plan, again, it's about 30% of the way there. We do show it primarily consistently along the edge of the road. There are going to be some locations, Sandy Valley Road is a spot where we may be able to shift the sidewalk away from the road and try and get a little buffer in there. If you pull that one up, I think you'll be able to see it pretty well. right in that area. See all the area you have colored yellow there? That's that area inside the right-of-way. So we're currently showing it along the edge of the road. As we move the design forward, one of the things we'd look to do there is try to set the sidewalk back. There's a good barrier there. There's a tree, a fence, stone wall. But there could be an opportunity to move the sidewalk off the road there and create a buffer, as well as up by the High Street section there where there's a buffer there as well. So we'll look for those opportunities to create buffers.
But like so if we just start at Deerfield and we're working our way towards Fox Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a long section there where the stone wall is below the grade, and but it's a very rural area. So what would that look like with the sidewalk? I mean,
I believe in that area there's also a lot of wetlands, so we'd be right along the edge of the road.
It's very wet in there.
Yeah, for a lot of that section.
There's one property owner that I haven't contacted yet. I've tried numerous times, who lives on the corner of Fox Hill and Gay Street, and that would potentially open up the door for another 300 feet to pick up prior to you reaching Fox Hill. So essentially coming from Deerfield, you grab about 300 feet from point A to the corner of Fox Hill, along with the 750 feet from the existing easement, along with the potential 300 feet from the homeowner that was okay with us exploring this opportunity behind the wall. So you're looking at essentially a shot at about almost close to 1,400 linear feet of sidewalk that can have that meandering look before you really get to the problematic areas of wetlands, topography, and a bunch of other things that are quite frankly going to be a hurdle. And to Mr. McCusker's point, do you want to start investing our money that's specifically allocated for design into kind of derailing that a little bit to explore all these other options, or is the planning board and the board of selectmen okay with saying, wow, we are picking up close to 1,400 linear feet potentially if that other homeowner is on board. We do have a slightly meandering north, and yes, we will have some of the sidewalk on edge of pavement as well. So kind of we're like stuck right now in this point of design. Mike can't move, and we're waiting for planning board and the board of selectmen to reach, inevitably the board of selectmen to reach a final decision based on a recommendation from you guys. And one note too, and Dave, it was a great job with the photos, and it's great to see.
Go to the mic.
Sorry. You're not getting picked up by the camera.
Yeah, it's great job with the photos and looking at the renderings from the various communities, and I get the point of it, and they look great. But I just don't want a false depiction of what this sidewalk is going to look like in the areas that is going to be along edge of pavement. And I saw, obviously, the Clabbertree Street project, and that was a different project. That was a request, and part of the project, the scope of the project, was to create somewhat like a masonry wall going up Clabbertree Street, and that's not. It would never be our intentions with the existing tumbled look that's currently along Gay Street as it is now. So to look at those two, I get the point of it, but to say, oh, this is what it's going to look like is clearly false. It's not going to happen. But I get the point of saying it could look.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I want, I want the sidewalk to happen.
Sure.
I'm concerned that we want something that doesn't, destroy the rural character of the street and all the things, the aesthetics of the street, the experience of that street. We want people to enjoy it. So that's why I'm bringing up these ideas. And when you approach the people, how are you? What are you? Do you have pictures to show them, or you have an idea of like what behind the walls means? Like,
Well, the conversations I had with the homeowners, and I obviously wouldn't name the homeowners, but it was pretty. I felt somewhat like a telemarketer calling, to be honest with you, because I'm not in a place here where I'm against it or not. I'm just trying to do something that I don't want to aggravate the homeowner and start saying, or start rumors that we are going behind the rock wall. So the approach was pretty simple in that, they knew who I was and they knew kind of where the design stood, and it was just more or less, would you consider? And it was an absolutely no. I will say of the 4 that said absolutely not, 3 out of the 4 were totally in favor of the project, though. One of the 4, I'm losing my track of numbers now, but one of them in particular had young children. She said, no way on the side of the rock wall, but I want it on edge of pavement. I have young kids, family, etc., that we would love the opportunity to be able to walk. So I thought of it as great feedback, and it would be great if they all said, yeah, go behind the rock wall, because then I could tell Mike, well, here are 3 more. So it's not that we're against it, but it's tough. I mean, it's a tough approach, especially where you do have some opposition with residents on Gay Street, to then call them and say, you know, I know you're totally against a sidewalk, but would you consider it being on your side of the rock wall too? And I don't necessarily think that's a respectful thing to do.
And I think, because I do like this idea also, and if one of the opportunities we have, though, is for landscaping, like to make it look nice to drive through. Will that also be part of the plan, as far as the trees that you're going to take out, and
Sure.
then the plantings that you intend?
100%. I think, you know, as we progress through the design process, you know, you can get into really the particulars of what are we looking at for, like, sample colors. If we went with a concrete sidewalk, which I would recommend just from an infrastructural standpoint, what are the tints or the tones or the colors that you could add to that to not make it that bright white? And you can certainly do anything, any color that you'd like. So things like that, and landscape features, and, you know, within the right of way, can we have like buffers like Mike had mentioned? Can we add like some landscape features that would really, it might actually end up looking better than it does now? So those are things that you consider as you progress through the design stages. At 30%, you can't really say that, and especially where we don't know now, or we're at a dead standstill of, is it going behind a wall here or there or not? When we have that definitive path, then we're going to have the definitive right of way and knowing where we can add some features like you're mentioning. But I think it's important, imperative to say that you have to keep and maintain the current look of Gay Street as much as you can. Is it going to look different? Certainly. But, you know, potentially in some eyes could look better. Everyone's going to have differing views, but it's our goal and objective to make sure that the main features, the rock wall, the trees, the landscape, and the overall feel of Gay Street is maintained as best we can.
So the intention also is similar to when you were reaching out to homeowners as far as putting the wall in their property. You would also have to do the same for these plantings.
If they're within the right of way, I mean, we could definitely solicit feedback through the public hearings that we'll have. We're still at a benchmark of 30%. We'll have a public hearing at 70 and a public at 100. So at that point, at 100, obviously things are kind of designed. But, you know, that said, things can always be tweaked as far as like a landscape feature, a type of tree, a type of shrub, a planting. Those are simple, and quite frankly, those are in our wheelhouse of expertise and house here in TPW. We can make some things happen with things like that. So.
Okay, great.
Do you have any idea of what the cost is going to be from the various designs that you're going through? Highest to lowest, what you might be?
No, I'd let Mike weigh on that.
It's early to tell, but I'd say it could be in the $3 million range. Once you start getting into some of the retaining walls, that's why it's too early, because we don't have the details on some of those things.
And that's without takings or anything like that, right?
Correct. Yep.
When do you decide concrete, asphalt? I'm just curious. You mentioned about tinting the concrete.
Yeah, I think, well, we'll obviously present that option to the Board of Selectmen. They might ask for our recommendation. I always say concrete all day long, just from a structural standpoint. If you have a slab that fails, it's a lot easier to pop up a slab, but if you have the asphalt, it starts to crack, crumble, and move all over the place. Now the whole thing begins to look like, not like I like it to look, so. But, you know, those minor details, I'd probably, you know, sit down with Mike Gillette and get his recommendation as to how we would present that to the Board of Selectmen to give them the proper options of.
Right. And I had 2 more questions. How do you get over Purgatory Brook? What's the plan there? 'Cause the road goes over it by Milk Street.
That's why we're paying him. To get us
Are you going to build a bridge? How do you do that?
No bridge there. What we would do is we'd look to, whichever side the sidewalk's going to be on, we'd look to try and tweak the road as much as we can. I mean, every foot matters over that brook. We'd look to, I believe, extend the culvert slightly, and there would be some potential retaining walls to protect the slopes.
And I'm hearing, you've talked to some homeowners, some have said no, some are pending. In my head, I'm trying to picture, are we going to achieve a slalom course in front? And I would love, while I appreciate all of this, it's hard to go, you know, this far. What are we doing here? and what is this going to end up looking like? And that's what I know you've provided us with addresses, but it was really hard to kind of place it on a map and say, okay, wait, this is behind, this is in front, how are we doing this? So that would be helpful for me. And I don't know if other people are in the same boat, but it's tough to visualize. I see, yellow lines and orange and.
I mean, maybe what if we could do like a field trip out here to do a quick walk along the.
It's just, yeah, I mean, obviously being out there is much easier, but that's something in my mind I'm trying to wrap my head around. What is this going to end up looking like? How many, do I go 3 houses in front and then 2 behind and then 6 in front and then 1 behind? So that's what I'm trying to
Yeah, you're
figure
right.
out.
At this point, until we hear from the other 4, I think it is a bit of a slalom course, except for that, 700 to 800 foot section just east of Fox Hill.
Right. Okay.
I think, Chris, too, the segments that we have average, I'm looking here at the notes, they're about 200 to 250 to about 300 feet. So, when we left the Board of Selectmen meeting, the first thing I said to Mike Myers was, we obviously have to find a length here that makes sense, so it isn't like a slalom course. You're obviously not going to find like 20 feet in between wetlands that you can say, oh, let's squeeze it in here and then jog it back out. So it seems as though the consistent patterns right now from even the homeowner that was willing to allow us to design and go behind the rock wall, you're looking at 300 feet there. So they're almost football field stretches that we're looking at. Not so much like, oh, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. And I don't think that's the approach my sidewalk bombardier operator wants to take either, because then I think it would create a mess. So that said, I think there's going to be consistency to the point of a tune of probably 300 feet, with the exception of the 750-foot easement along that Fox Meadow development, the backside of it.
Okay.
That's probably your longest stretch. I think for now, I mean, as you're driving down Gay Street, what I would say is envision, just until we get 100% confirmation or affirmation from any of the residents, just envision after you pass Fox Hill, that stone dust walkway that would be constructed properly, and that would be your first segment of behind the rock wall. Then as you get past Thatcher Street, then it would meander back out. As you go down towards Milk Street, there was one resident just adjacent to Milk Street that was willing to allow us to go into their property and go behind the rock wall again. So it's almost like you get the Fox Hill stretch, you're back out. Go down towards Milk Street, you're back in for about 300 feet. And then at that point, it would probably be a fair bet to say the rest of the way would probably be edge of pavement. So you'd have 2 long stretches behind, back out, and run it to.
So Thatcher to Milk would be in front.
Thatcher to Milk would be
In front of the wall.
in front of the wall, correct.
Roughly speaking.
Roughly, yeah. I mean, it would probably exceed, I don't want to get specific,
Yeah, no,
but
I
I mean, it would probably exceed a little bit past Thatcher, but measure off, 750 feet from Fox Hill past Thatcher.
Right, okay.
Which I think is a good chunk. I think it's not that it's a compromise for some people's desires or not, but at least it's something. Like Mike said, it's 10%. If you pick up the other 300 feet, I'm not a percentage guy, but that increases your percentage of what the project is, and so on and so forth.
In those scenarios, it just occurred to me, is the wall consistent? Do we have to make a break in the wall when we get to that new property owner to go in front? I'm just, in general.
There's some areas where there actually is a break.
There's already
in the
a break?
wall, and then there are some other areas where you would have to break the wall, yes.
Okay.
So you said that you were kind of stuck. What guidance do you need from us then? Because you've described what you think might be possible, and then what's.
We're just looking for guidance. Inevitably, I mean, I know you guys are going to go before the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation. Not quite sure if it's going to be on the 20th or not. We're inevitably going to be looking at them for a decision and some guidance to either tell TEC to proceed. If you get in touch with, I'm just using examples here, but if you get in touch with the remaining homeowners and they're all on board to allow for the design to take place within the right-of-way, then by all means go ahead. I don't know. I mean, I know you guys wanted an update on this. I know there were some inquiries from the board, so we just felt as though we'd present it to you. And quite frankly, I'm not trying to pitch it either way, but as Mr. McCusker said, if you want, if we want to progress with this, and I don't feel as though we're rushing it by any means, but progress with this with the notion that we at least have the easement. It looks as though we're at least going to pick up one abutter, and if we pick up any other abutters that are in favor, that's like bonus. And if not, then we have the easement and the one abutter. And let's carry on with the project. That would be my wish anyways, if you guys are on board with that, but it's your decision to.
Well, I'm fine with pursuing the going behind. My only concern is if we make it, by doing so, it makes it costly to the point of.
Sure.
We can't do it, then we have to make a decision. What's more important, doing it or?
Right. And it's going to be costly. We've done, takings. We've done, the appraisals come in. We did takings down off of Clabbertree Street for the recent project. And
That's not what you're talking about, the cost. You're talking about engineering.
Just in general,
Both.
taking trees down that are
Right.
behind the wall.
Just came to take it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
takings
including
along Gay
takings,
Street
yeah.
would be very expensive, and it was brought up during the Board of Selectmen meeting that by doing it behind the rock wall, one of the benefits is that you were eliminating granite curbing. I didn't run any numbers because I'm not an appraiser and I can't assess value right now, but I would venture to guess that the cost for the granite curbing could inevitably be cheaper than what the appraisals would come in at for the takings necessary. So,
Well, let me see if I can, I want us, we've discussed it a lot, so let me see if I have our sort of consensus here. I think one is that we all agree that the northbound side, when we presented the different options, I think the north-only side is something that we all support.
Contiguous.
And that because it'll be contiguous, and I think that'll be safer. I think the rest, a lot of other things are sort of, can you also consider crossings from side streets and stuff? And that's not a hard position, but it's just that that's been raised a few times. It's like people who maybe they want to get from Milk Street over to the sidewalk. That's a thing to consider. What you've identified and following up with the abutters, I think we want you to continue that process. I don't sense a consensus that we're going to say you've absolutely got to make it be behind the stone walls. It sounds like we're in agreement with what you just described. That's consistent with what the majority here feels. I think, are there any other, does that capture it? I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Going behind is a preference, not a deal breaker.
Right.
But, there's some realities financially and otherwise that we have to live
Sure.
with here, so. And you're doing everything you can. That's recognized by this board.
and I think that it's always been, what I would have hoped is that residents, when they could picture the idea of a behind the paths thing, that they would say, this is an opportunity to make Gay Street even better looking, and that we would not have to be, it would not be a forcible taking. I don't think nobody supports that here.
Right.
Like, when we talk about takings, it's more like, well, if the resident was in favor, then we have to compensate them.
Sure.
But it would not be, I would not support, I don't think anyone here would support just telling people we're going to do it, and that's too bad. If you don't like it, we'll take your property.
sure.
Nobody wants that, right?
No. Not at all.
So, I think that's our consensus position. And if we need to vote on it, can we just have or are there any other public? Yes.
Hi, Steve Botello, 2 Summer Street. I've been asked on behalf of the Bike Pedestrian Safety Committee just to say that we're fully in favor of the sidewalk in general. And we did provide a recommendation to the board about wherever possible, if we could have the sidewalk behind the wall, just wherever possible, just as a recommendation. And thank you, Mike and Todd, for all the hard work. I'm a big fan of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I don't have a written out motion, but I think what I described is in the minutes, and can I just get a motion that the consensus of this committee is to support the project in the way I just described?
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
We make a motion to support the project as described by David, which will be in the minutes.
Great.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Thank you,
All right,
Todd.
thank you, guys.
Hope that helps.
The next, and we have more. The next item on the agenda, review and discussion of any zoning amendments for possible town hall meeting. So there are three aspects to this that I'd like us to go through. The first one is I want to discuss the fall 2017 Planning Board articles that were disapproved by the Attorney General's office. Secondly, we need to provide a list, a description of the articles that we might propose if there is a fall town meeting in Westwood this year. It's not clear that the selectmen have not opened the warrant, and it's not entirely clear that there will be a fall town meeting, but we have time to have public hearings on that, but we have some descriptions of potential articles. We just need to send those to the selectmen, then they'll look at those and say whether they'll decide if that's something that we need to call a town meeting over. And the third element was that there have been residents have submitted some ideas and comments and things, and I just want the board to consider those and make a decision as to whether we would be interested in formally supporting any of that. So those are the three items. The first one, and I'll just give my summary based on what various things there. At our, so the fall 2017 town meeting, there were 3 planning board articles, and the substance of those articles, one would have allowed the employee cafeteria accessory use in the highway business district. The second article redefined some medical uses terms, and the third article had to do with housekeeping amendments, which was literally just adjustments of numbers and typos and things. So these, the defect, what was the defect? At our October 3rd, 2017 Planning Board meeting, we opened a public hearing on the zoning amendments. We continued that hearing to October 17th, which was a joint meeting with the Finance and Warrant Commission, which is what we typically do so that we can take additional feedback and make modifications on. At that hearing, we failed to make a motion to continue the public hearing to a definite time and place, which would have been our next planning board meeting on October 24th. Now, that meeting was actually canceled because there were no applications and there had been no further discussion of these articles. We then had a meeting on November 7th where we closed the public hearing for the town meeting articles. Town meeting met on November 13th and approved the articles. But our failure to provide adequate notice of where and when the next public hearing was going to be continued was a procedural defect. So the Attorney General's office reviewed this timeline of events and put approval of the articles on hold, required Westwood to publish a notice of the procedural defect. This was to provide an opportunity for anyone to object, to say that that they had been harmed or by the procedural defect. Someone objected to this, and as a result, the Attorney General was required to deny approval of the articles without considering the substance of those articles. So that's where we were, and I was going to at that point ask if there were any questions for our town planner, but she was not able to make it here tonight. But that's a summary of what happened. Is there any board discussion or questions or comments on that much?
Regarding the defect? No.
Okay. So is there anyone wishing to speak on this matter from the public or, okay. So if there's no one to speak on that, then what I would think we would typically do, or well, not typically, I don't know if this happened before, but is that we would have to, if we wanted to pass these articles, we would have to repeat the process. So we'd have to reopen a public hearing and just do it right. So I think what we could consider here is to just say let's have a motion to take that action at for the next town meeting and just incorporate these articles into that process.
So start from the beginning in terms of.
There has to be a hearing.
Right, it would have to be,
Public
I'm just
process.
saying
You need advertising. Yeah, I mean,
so to include it in the process that we'll do for any other articles that we do for the next town meeting.
so just add these 3 to whatever we think we might come up with.
Right, because we're not having a public hearing on them now, we don't, even though there wouldn't be any changes, I assume, but that would happen through the normal process if we would have a public hearing, open it, discuss them again, and so forth.
Well, assuming this board feels the same as the last board did 8 months ago or so, then I don't see why this board would not include this in the next time they have a town meeting to adopt these 3 articles. I can't see why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, there's an article in there where it had to do with that table.
11, yeah, Article 11.
Where it had to do with substance
Rehabilitation treatment.
rehabilitation treatment. I'd want to look at, like, where did we put that within the zone, and the rationale for it.
You know, and all of that would be addressed in the public process.
Yes.
But it can't if we don't push this forward.
Yeah, so I'm all for it.
And it's off the table entirely if we don't push this forward. That means we're summarily dismissing all 3 articles. if we
Yeah,
don't
I'm
bring
in
this
favor
up.
of discussing these.
Bringing them
through
forward,
the
yeah.
process, yeah.
So I think if someone would just make a motion that we should resubmit the articles from fall 2017 as a part of the next town meeting cycle.
I move we advance Articles 10, 11, 12 as they were presented for the November 2017 town meeting to be included in this planning board's next proposal of articles for the next town meeting for Town of Westwood, either fall of 2018 or spring of 2019.
I second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, or is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. The second issue is to prepare these descriptions of the articles, and this is in our meeting packet. Abby had outlined, it looks like more than 6. Yeah, there's 7.
Yeah, she just typed them.
7 potential articles. We'll kind of go down the list here. So, and basically what I would would you like me to just read through the list, or does anyone have anything to suggest ahead of time?
Well, these are suggestions by Abby, as the planning staff sees. These are discrepancies or shortcomings in our current zoning that they want to address. And I think it's up to us to discuss them and see if they warrant public.
So do you want to go one by one, or?
Yeah, we have
All
to
right.
start the discussion at some point. We could throw some out if we say, no, it's not a problem, or.
Let's just start with one then.
All right, the first one is the direction of a perpendicular fence.
Perimeter.
Oh. It's getting,
It's not that late.
most fences are.
They are perpendicular.
The direction of a perimeter fence, which side should face in out, possibly regulate that the finished side faces out. There are no zoning regulations presently. Some towns may have this in the zoning, but typically it is not regulated.
So the idea here is I've driven through where you see a home being built, and then the unfinished side facing out, and then it gets put up for sale. So it's considered to be one of those. It would be expected that the owner would not do that, but do we want to put this in as?
I think it's done as a courtesy to your neighbor, but I think the real issue is if you're putting a fence up on Gay Street, do we want the unfinished side facing Gay Street, or do we want the nice, because Gay Street is the neighbor of that person, if it's a side street, if they live on a corner or something like that. So I think the real issue is when it's facing the street. I think between neighbors, I'm not sure if we want to get involved in that. But my issue is, if you're putting up a 6-foot fence on Canton Street should see the nice side of the fence, not the unfinished side of the fence. And the backyard should see the unfinished. That's my take on this. I don't know that I want to get involved with neighbors. I think it's worked for
Well, I mean, that's what the
decades or centuries as a courtesy, but maybe it hasn't. Maybe she's seeing problems and I'm not aware of. I don't know. Anyone else here? Problems of fences?
I've seen 3 examples in the last couple of years.
Between neighbors or?
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess my thought is, it sounds like I have not heard of a strong reason to do this.
Well, Just
If
think
we-
about it, and next time we meet and talk about it, think of your position, and, I mean, all of us,
I guess we can kind of think of.
see what Abby comes up with more.
So we're going to submit these, I think, they just need to know potentially what's on the list. The selectmen can look at this too and say, oh, yes, we need to have a town meeting over that.
Yeah.
So I think for now, it's more, I guess, a negative, like, does anybody want to strike this or leave it in?
I think
Sounds
it's
like
worth discussing.
worth discussing, okay.
And this could be coupled with the.
I'm not exactly sure what she was driving at, what the issue is, so I'd like to talk
Okay.
with Abby about.
The second possible article is accessory apartments being limited to family members only. So proposing a bylaw so that we would restrict accessory apartments to family members only. There are concerns that this couldn't be reasonably enforced.
Yeah, I don't know how you enforce this. I mean,
To verify that it's
you
really.
have your in-laws move in, and then they pass on, and now you have an accessory apartment that's costing you money to heat, to whatever, and you can't,
Right, you
unless
can't
you
rent
have
it.
another family member who needs another place to live, you can't rent it out. It just doesn't seem feasible. And, I mean, it might be good temporary for your brother-in-law, and then he moves on with his life, but you have this accessory apartment. You're handcuffing that owner.
Well, and when we reviewed the increase of the limits there, it really was clear that we're talking about the structural, like you're taking a building and you're adding an accessory apartment onto it. It's not about like who you rent, whether you rent or own or whatever. It's about you're creating a structure in town that's now capable of two people living in it and all. So it's more about that, I think, than, so this, I can understand why people might want to do this, but I'm not thinking it's a great idea for
It
the
was,
planning
at
board.
town meeting was sold, I felt, to increase the limit based on the aging population. My mom needs to move in. It wasn't sold to residents as, you can put on this accessory apartment and rent it out to generate income.
So this article would be a way to limit that. I mean, it would be a way to say they really are in-law apartments, so.
Yeah, but like you say, you can't enforce it, so what's the point?
And I don't know if we have any, do we have any issues on the books from the police department responding to calls? Or do we have bad neighbors because they're not family members?
I think the concern is the intention of putting on an accessory apartment with the intention to rent. So you buy a house in a nice neighborhood, and then a neighbor puts on an accessory apartment with the intention to rent out.
Mhm.
Some people wouldn't want to have moved into that neighborhood for that reason.
Well, better yet, an Airbnb.
Well,
Right.
Rent it out by
Right.
the night.
No, a friend
I
of
think-
mine did this in Stoughton, where he generated additional income by doing this. So I'm just saying that the sell at town meeting was for the aging population.
Well, I think that was one of them. I think we had issues where we had accessory apartments in town that were illegal. And we were already at our cap, and we couldn't make them legal. And so they couldn't even sell their house unless they demolished the accessory apartment. And then the issue of the aging family members was a secondary opportunity, and then also the low-income opportunity. You can move into Westwood without having to put 10% down on a new home. There were a number of ancillary benefits to it from a housing perspective, but one of the primary reasons it came up was we were at our limit of 50, and we had people knocking on the door wanting more, so there was a market for it. And we had the issue of the existing accessory apartments in town that were done illegally. And if those homeowners wanted to make them legal, we couldn't even do that for them. So those were the things Abby and the planning staff were seeing. And that's why the planning board decided to go from 1%, I think, to 2%. I think they upped it from 50 to 100.
Why don't I,
whatever that was.
why don't I just poll people here? Like, so the article would be specifically to limit to family members only So, I mean, who would want to consider that here?
I would.
I'd be willing to consider it.
There was a town that recently did it, had, at last town meeting last, was it in April 2018? Heading down towards the Cape. We could find out how they monitor that. It's strictly for in-laws. And how do they police that to make sure that they are only rented out to family? How are they going to monitor that?
What if the in-laws, that's to date? Honestly, and
They have
somebody else moves in?
significant other move in.
Still
It's
the in-law,
not
though.
family.
It's only strictly for family members is the way they have it.
It's,
Now
but
this one can't move in?
it's really difficult to identify like how far do you extend family? And does it have to be blood?
Well,
by
it sounds like
marriage or
it sounds
common
like
law
we could
marriage?
have like the other issue. There are things we could argue about it, but it sounds like we got a couple of board members who would be interested in pursuing that. So why don't we keep it on the list for now? Third article is lots in 2 districts. Clarify what more restrictive district means so that it's clear which use can go over the zoning boundary line when zoning line split one lot. I remember that we did have some discussion
It's a little
about.
bit ambiguous.
Yeah, there weren't many issues, weren't many times like this in our town where, but there's, I think she said like half dozen. Yeah, it happens. There's
Yeah,
just not a
that's-
lot, but it's just clarifying language. It's just, we need to go over that. That's all she wants to do is.
My concern with that one there is that if you've got 2 lots in 2 districts, is that's what we're here for, to give special permits, and to say that if the lot is, what's the least restrictive, the commercial, right? I'm sorry, the residential. So, for example, if there was a parking lot that needed to be extended, then they could go ahead and extend that over without having to come before the board. So it takes away what we're here for.
Well, this isn't always just for special permit situations.
Just comes down to the zoning. If it's a split zone lot, it goes to the most restrictive zoning. So if you're half commercial, half residential, it's all gonna be considered residential as far as zoning goes. Understand what I'm saying? It's gonna be the most, it's
And
gonna be the more restrictive.
We have it
zone.
currently. I think what Abby's saying is, it's just not worded properly.
Yeah, right.
It's ambiguous. So we already have that in place, and I don't think she's looking to change that. She just wants to change how it's written.
More concise, right?
So
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So we'll keep that. The 4th item, this was the 4 or more car garage, special permit for a 4 or more car garage, clarify, not necessarily registered parked cars and driveways. We had some discussion, I think, at the last meeting about
We had a
this.
lot of discussion, but I don't know if we really got anywhere.
So ZBA has no recommendation.
I think we left with no change, didn't we?
I think it was something, we were gonna think about it and come back, and here we are.
Who was looking for this? Was it Joe Doyle? Who brought this up? I can't remember.
No, I believe Abby brought this up.
Yeah.
Okay. And she was kind of testing the waters, like feeling us out. How do we feel about
She was
that?
saying if we wanted to basically tighten up the language.
Dave, do you
What
remember?
storage meant, wasn't it? Wasn't it something about storage?
I wish we had the.
So we can try to,
Yeah, we had
Is it,
approved the
uh,
minutes.
No.
so, a common application with the ZBA is a request for a 4-car garage. The building commissioner has interpreted this and enforced the special permit route for garages of more than 3 cars, but not necessarily for parking or storing more than 3 cars on a property. You may want to consider deleting the words "the parking or storage area" so that only garages for more than 3 cars trigger a special permit. I remember also this came up as, what if somebody wants to put a big garage building in, and they end up using it to have like their landscaping business in it or something.
Well, that's a different, we're not here to talk about like what goes on inside. That's kind of up to other town offices. We are only here to talk about what's being constructed on the property for the purpose at the time. If they lied to us and then they conduct business out of it in a body shop or whatever it might
So,
be, that's,
I don't remember that we had a strong support for
I'm fine with
this.
the language as is, yeah.
I'm not in favor of making someone get a special permit. If they have a lot big enough for a 4-car garage and they're meeting all the setbacks and it's a part of the home, I don't have a problem with that. As just almost like a by right situation. I think it's unnecessarily.
Does anyone feel strongly
onerous.
that we should keep this on the list? Then I think we'll take this one off the list. Article 5, increased height for fences, we've discussed a few times. So this is increasing the height for fences. Right now it's 6 feet, it would become 7 feet, and then you need a special permit for 7 to 8 feet. Staff reviewed with the Zoning Board of Appeals members, as they are the review authority, and they were supportive of increasing the by right height from 6 to 7 feet, and the recommended 7 to 8 feet by special permit. This,
I think there were a few reasons. One was that some of the standard fences are getting to that height. And then 2, as Karen notes, with some of your applications, you ask for the height, the fence to be raised.
Raised up, yeah.
And
To
as a-
allow
as a
critters
Or
result-
6 inches,
to
yep,
get
so
out.
critters can go through. And of course, it would be in a wetland
I
area.
believe it's also in conformity with the, whatever, the latest zoning guidelines or something. And for those kind of reasons, 6 is a little tight, but I think.
I think if
keep it
if
there
town
and discuss it.
boards and such are seeing that 7 would be better, I don't have a problem with 7.
Yeah. I mean, we voted against it a year or so ago, but we can discuss it again and vote against it again. So I'd say we keep it in then, if that's what people agree with. Article 6, cleanup language in section 4.5 relating to non-conforming uses to eliminate confusion or misinterpretation. Well, we wouldn't want to do that, right? We want to leave the confusion in. So that sounds like a housekeeping kind of thing. Again, not that we endorse it immediately, but just.
Yeah, no,
let's
continue
just
discussion.
Continue discussion. And then the second Article 6 that's listed here, changes to the project area footnote on FMUOD 9.5, what? On FMUOD Section 959, alternative dimensions, minimum project area shall include contiguous parcels and parcels separated by roadway or railroad right-of-way that are effectively contiguous. How does this description provide, I mean, I know what we're
Same property
talking
be
about,
used
but.
more than once.
So that was an article I brought forward, because it doesn't specifically say that you can't reuse a property. Say the project did not go through in Islington. He used the Islington Pizza Building to do the project next door to him. Could he then reuse the Islington Pizza Building to do something else across the street, because they're contiguous? So how do we define?
Under what definition? Did the project go through, or the project didn't go through?
It went through.
It didn't, so, and now he's gonna still use the Westwood Pizza project to say, maybe do something across School Street to the cafe.
When he's already used it to do the Washington Street project, right?
Okay.
I don't.
Fair question.
But think about if the property were sold after it had been used. Does that mean that new owner doesn't get to?
Well, it's already been used, why would he?
I'm just saying, because it doesn't say you can't.
That's what I'm saying, that's why we have to put that in there. I mean, I think it opens us up to loopholes if we don't.
Right, but can we legally deny this new owner the opportunity,
I don't,
you know?
I mean, the square footage has already been used.
this
I
particular,
understand exactly what you're saying, I understand, I do. I'm just wondering if we have the right to make this, you know, basically telling somebody that they, I don't know what to use an example, but when you buy a piece of property that you can no longer do something, you can no longer get the tax credit on the property because it's already been taken by the previous owner. I just don't know if that's legal.
I think it is, because you're trying to, the whole idea of that 50% square footage is to try to maintain a certain character in the town.
Yeah.
So you're trying to maintain something, so then to use that square footage, which you're not gonna go up on it, for whatever reason, so that you can go you can add that square footage to another parcel. I think it's
This,
reasonable.
this
I think
is,
it's reasonable,
this,
but
it's important to note, this footnote is just the practice of planning boards around the state put into writing. This is not intended to make it easy for a developer to get away with something. It's intended to allow the town to consider a more global and comprehensive project that may jump across a street or a railroad. It's a tool that the planning board has at their disposal to give the opportunity for a project to be thought of as a more comprehensive plan for the town instead of just piecemealed and limited. It's been used in a number of situations in town, and most people don't even know it. The Stagecoach Plaza, the Shell station employed this particular footnote. And to just say categorically, you can't do it anywhere in town or FMUOD because some people didn't like what happened in Islington, I think is really tying the hands behind the back of the planning board. This is a tool by the planning board. We don't have to use it,
So
but
I think
it's an
we're getting,
opportunity.
I think we're kind of getting into litigating the details on this one. So it sounds, I mean, am I correct to say there's at least 2 or 3 of us who would want to talk more about this?
Is enough to leave it on
So
the list.
let's leave it on the
discuss
list.
going
Yeah.
forward.
All right, so that's what we had on the list here. The only thing we took off the list was the 4-car garage special permit. So I think what we do then is, I don't know that we need to make a motion or something. I think we've gone through this in the minutes.
Yeah,
and,
there's
I
nothing.
just, at the last meeting, though, there was
Yes.
some other ones that had come in from residents. One was a
Yes.
height restriction and a buffer, an increase in the buffer zone. So were those weren't included here at all? Were they something that we were going to discuss? Or maybe we could talk to Abby about
Did we
it?
vote them down, or
I
at
don't
least
believe
vote to take
so.
them off last time?
No,
So
I don't
no,
think
we didn't make a
We didn't make
decision.
any
Well,
decisions.
no vote,
So I think we
maybe
might
there
have.
wasn't enough interest to keep going with the discussion.
Well, I think actually, we, and it's in the minutes probably, but I think we invited Fran Fusco to come to the meeting and tell us about her proposal. So, and I don't know, if you wanted to bring one of them up first, we could describe it and then have Abby included on the list, I think would be.
In terms of the
So if-
articles?
I think first of all,
Um,
if you as a board member want to add something to this list, I think you could describe that and then we could add,
Going off of what Fran sent us? Is that what you're telling me?
well, I think she's here too, so if it's the same thing, then we would just.
Well, it was on the agenda, then it was off, then it was on. It's been in and out every time I
So
check the list.
So-
why
I
don't
know if I was on
I
or not.
invite you up to the podium to describe what it is you'd like.
So it had to do with the height restriction to 2
Actually,
stories.
I had Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. Let me just refer back to my notes, since I wasn't really ready, but one of the items that I was talking about was possibly reducing the maximum building height from 29 feet, to 29 feet from 36 feet. That would help restrict the height within FMUOD 6 and 7. And also, the next one I was going to mention was decrease the percentage of residential units from 50% of total gross floor area in FMUOD 6 and 7 to 33%. As in stated in the bylaw 9.5.13, stating that that is in place, the 33% of the total gross floor area of a project within FMUOD 1. Why would not carry forward into 6 and 7 if it's over in University, which is FMUOD 1, correct?
Yes, it is.
So that is something we might want to consider. And also the setbacks, limiting them to 20 feet front, back, and sides. And also, there was also a question with FMUOD 7. Why is it only in a certain section of 109? We are over in FMUOD 6 6, it's the whole length of Washington Street. That's just a question, and why can't we extend that?
What's the question exactly?
In FMUOD 7, it's not the whole length of
It's a smaller area.
High Street. It's a smaller area.
Center of Westwood as opposed
Well-
to the entire length of
The-
109.
No, Washington Street goes beyond.
But it doesn't go on both sides
It
of the
doesn't
street.
go on both sides.
It goes down the railroad side to extend all the way to
It
Westwood Street.
stops at Brookfield, or before Brookfield.
Good,
On
no,
that
no, no.
side of
Yeah,
the
but that's
street.
all residential. On 109, you have that whole plaza of where
The-
Dunkin' Donuts is and across the street.
There was talk of extending it down
So
there.
that might be another,
The intent of FMUOD is to attract commercial businesses.
correct.
So where they're delineated, it was decided, I forget how long ago, it was 2015, 2013, that those were the areas that they were looking to attract businesses for. If there's additional places
We're not
to
looking to tear
add.
down residential homes.
So why don't we,
Well,
let's.
correct,
could-
but what I'm saying is on 109,
Actually, guys, come on.
it's-
What we should do here is, we're talking about whether or not the planning board would be willing to include in the list of articles that we are going to sponsor some additional articles that have been suggested.
yes.
So I think you've summarized, 3 possible articles: reducing the maximum building height, decreasing the percentage of residential units that would be allowed in FMUOD 6 and 7, limiting setbacks. Again, I remember that from last time. Are those the 3
Yes. Yeah.
items? Now, I think the question, and I know this is sort of like, we've had some time to review it last week, but I would sort of ask, are the board members interested in sponsoring these? I mean, that might kind of jumping right into it, but,
I am not, as I have said before, the reasons that we do not limit ourselves is to gain a foothold of what can be done. We are still the gatekeepers to whatever happens in any of these special permits. We decide what happens. Nothing can get pulled over on us. Nothing can be forced on us. We're still the gatekeepers. And by limiting ourselves, we're taking away opportunity to get the job done in the first place. That's my take on
If
it.
you look
But
at
why
Needham,
would-
though, they're
So-
only 2 stories.
so, Mike,
Right.
are you in favor of any of these?
No.
Are you?
I'm not either,
No.
for the same reasons.
Deb, are
Mike said.
you?
Yes.
Are you in favor of all of them? Or- I mean,
I have to look at the percentage, but I think so, but the first and the third, definitely. The setbacks and the height.
and Brian, what are your thoughts?
I like the idea of the height. I like towns that restrict the height on them, so you don't have the 3-story building next to the 1-story building. I like like the main streets in Needham, Wellesley.
Lexington.
Then as far as the percentage, yeah, I mean, if I'm up for that, if residents are interested in reducing to 33%. And then the setbacks, what is the current setback?
0 and 6, 10 and
Yes.
7.
So I don't know about 20, but I'd be interested in something.
I mean, why would you have over in FMUOD 1, 33%?
Entirely different pieces of property, that's why.
Different
That's why,
topography.
that's why they allow different in FMUOD 5 for residences.
Yeah, so I think,
They're not supposed to be
so our,
exactly the same.
so basically, we either sponsor the articles, and we could work with throughout the process to define them. Or if we are not interested in sponsoring them, then you would go the petition route and work with the town council, and Abby and would assist and all that kind of thing. It's
And
just that,
you need four to bring it forward, right, from the board?
well, I mean, I think we need a majority. I mean, we would vote on things, but that's, at this point, it's just, are we going to sponsor this? We have 2 people that are not interested. And my thoughts are that's limiting the setbacks. I mean, the setbacks were adjusted to encourage things to be closer to the street. I'm not in favor of that. Decreasing the percent of residential units. reducing the maximum building height. I mean, I kind of feel like we've had a lot of discretion in the special permit process to review these things, and I'm also looking at, for this town meeting, I'm not, I think the petition route is probably the way to go with these. I'm not ready to jump on to support them at this point. So I don't know if we need to have a vote, or
I think we
What I
just
would
had
say-
suggestions before us. I don't know if there's something to vote on.
we're not at the, we always ask people to come here first, so we don't want to be, and we have another meeting, so I would say that at this point, there's not a majority of members in support of these items. So you could follow up with Abby, and so, I mean, we may not even have a town meeting, so I don't see any action that we're taking at this point. Unless anyone wants to make a motion or something. We could consider a motion not, well.
No, I think that's,
All right, so I
don't think we have anything to do.
No.
We have nothing
All right.
before us, except a suggestion, and we gave our thoughts.
So that's item 9, the zoning amendments. The last item on the agenda, or no, we have a couple more. So item 10 is the comprehensive plan update and work session. It's 10:20. I don't think we're going to have a work session on the comprehensive plan tonight. What I would like to do is at the last meeting, we had a long discussion, and part of that, we identified the required sections of the plan, and we talked about having a planning board liaison for each section. I'd like to get people to indicate which sections that they are interested in, and to assign board members to those sections. Let's see if I
What were
can.
the sections again?
Let me.
They're not included.
I have them listed here if I can. I usually have the plan with me. And,
I have it right here.
Okay, if you just go to the table of contents, where we can. Yep, so the sections are land use, town centers, housing, economic development, natural and cultural resources, community facilities, open space and rec, transportation, and implementation. The implementation pulls all the other sections together and basically bullets out all the types of things you want to do. So I think there are 5 of us. It's probably necessary for each person to be on a couple of these groups. I mean, everyone can be involved in the work groups about everything, but I think kind of identifying. Why don't we just go down the line, and if you want to start, Deb, and see, are there ones that stand out in particular sections you'd want to be?
I'll take town centers. Are we supposed to take 2 or 1?
I think name next to 2.
2.
2?
Just do one for now, go through twice.
Oh, we can do that's
What was that?
Yeah, so town centers,
Brian, what do you?
open space and recreation.
All right. Implementation. Recording.
So, Brian, you said town center.
Open
I said town centers.
Oh, you said town center, but then you said town centers. I'm sorry, you said it. Okay.
I was just
So
reading.
what do you want?
Open space and recreation.
Got it.
And implementation.
Economic development,
What's that leave me with?
land use.
Housing.
Housing, natural resources,
I'll take
community.
housing.
All right. I'm going to go back for.
Actually, you should go here, since he did kept the last choice.
Right.
You should snake.
Where's the fantasy?
It's true.
Well,
We're looking at,
Mike, what do you want next? You say before.
I'm sorry, what's left on
How
the
about
board still?
facilities or community?
town center, or no?
Town center's good.
You did housing,
I did housing.
community centers, or
Oh,
community?
natural resources?
Natural resources.
There you go.
I'll take land use.
I'll do transportation.
Was Brian, did you say?
Right.
Transportation.
Okay, so what do we have left?
Natural resources is left, or did someone say that?
I took natural resources.
Okay.
Mike took it.
How about community?
And you have housing too, right, Mike?
And housing, yeah.
Types of community.
So what do we have, 1, 2, 9?
Yes, I think we're covered.
All right, so who's got land use?
I do.
Town centers, housing,
Yeah.
economic development, natural and cultural resources, community facilities, open space and rec, transportation, implementation.
Whose implementation you want?
Someone has 3 then, right?
No.
Only, I have
Two,
one.
No, sorry, someone has,
Yeah, I just took one because,
oh.
actually, I had actually written this up somewhere and that's what I had
You
assigned
know what
people.
we might need, since we're writing it, is the opening. There's like an opening intro, as it were, to the one in 2000, I believe.
Yeah, well, I think.
Maybe
what-
not? Is there a?
Yeah,
I
well,
can't
there's
remember.
an introduction and then there's.
Yeah, well, someone, that's gonna have to get written by this steering committee.
I think what I'm suggesting is we've identified the areas, the subject areas, and the idea was there would be a steering committee of additional people appointed, and we're the liaisons to that. But now that we have our people, we've identified which sections we're doing. What I would suggest is that we could start this process of recruiting members. Tonight, I don't know that we have, I don't want to go over all of the materials again, but what I would suggest.
Members of the steering committee?
What
Or
I'm
working
not
members?
satisfied with our plan to have the selectmen make all these appointments. I think we should help them by getting this process started we have now appointed ourselves essentially for subject areas, and we should recruit people to be on the working groups and get them to then apply to be members of the committee.
We just finished, we've been working on the open space and rec plan. I don't know if your intention is to handle it the same way, but the staff really recruited the members of the board, of the.
Yeah, I mentioned before, I think we need some separation between this board and the steering committee. I really don't think, I think there needs to be some visible separation between those two entities. I don't think it's on the planning board to pick the steering committee
I agree.
and then
because
have the
then-
planning board agree with what the steering committee, I
Then you
think.
don't got that nice cross-section of town who's developing this comprehensive plan. You have basically a hand-picked planning board group and people are gonna object to that, I think.
I think we should encourage anyone we know to go help the steering committee and work on those committees, working members, for lack of a better title. I think everyone in town should be involved in that if they're interested, but for
The appointees should be
identifying
done by-
steering committees, I really don't think this board.
See, I think this is our plan, and it's our responsibility to author it. And the idea that we would just be approving what some steering committee created, it's our plan. This is the plan that the planning board is responsible for. And so I think it makes sense
I
to,
disagree. I think this is the vision for the residents of the town.
yes, but
That's how we handled it with the open space plan.
I just think politically there needs to be some separation. I think if it all goes bad, it all comes down to us, and that's a bad look. I think if we share this with our town selectmen, I think we'll be in much better shape. We're gonna have enough work to do. Talk about, the planning board is handpicking their own steering committee to put forth their own thing they wanna write. That just doesn't sound right to me.
well, it's not hand-picking them. It's
Well, if we
identifying
select
people.
them, that's what we're doing.
The selectmen can nominate additional people, and individuals who are not connected to either ones can apply. Like, we just get the process started and publicize it, and Yeah, but anyway, I think we have, so then we have our subject areas identified. Did people have a chance to review any of those materials that Abby had put together, like the description of the duties and things like that? And
I haven't at length, no.
I would seem pretty generalized.
I think we need her here to discuss.
All right.
They're
So
her
why don't we
thoughts.
just continue the discussion at the
Yeah.
next, at our September 5th?
Do we need a motion for that?
I don't think
No,
so.
I think we've
This
identified.
is just our,
We've got our people identified, so.
September 5th or 25th?
September 5th.
5th, then the 25th.
And the last item, well, the last item on the agenda is a approval not required application for property on Reservoir Road. This is a wooded area between Martha Jones School and the Pond Plain area, I think. And with an approval not required plan, we don't get into the substantive details about the building. We're reviewing the plans to determine if the frontage requirements are met so that the plan is not a subdivision and therefore not subject to the subdivision control law. We have the map of this. Basically, it's combining 3 lots to achieve enough frontage to convert a non-buildable wooded lot into a buildable lot.
So just turning, instead of subdividing, you're.
Yeah, it's actually
you
consolidating.
Conglomerate, yeah, consolidation.
This was approved by the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, do you have any other information on it that to share with us?
Well, we did a pretty thorough review of it. It was a good plan, according to the Conservation Commission.
How did
They
the
had
abutters
infiltration. The house is pretty far from any of the abutters. There's quite a bit of distance between them. There were some people that were opposed to it, some neighbors from maybe Pond Plain.
What was their opposition?
They already have so much water, they don't want more of it. But this plan isn't gonna create more water because they're recharging all water on that lot.
So they've addressed the issue of.
Yes.
And they're looking for us for what, a recommendation?
No, it's an ANR plan, it's approval not required.
Right, basically, it's
Just
like-
making sure all the i's are dotted and t's are
So
crossed.
if you combine the lots, I believe it creates the minimum frontage.
Right, and that's what they're doing. That's why they bought all 3 lots, so they could do this.
And
Build
those
a
are, I
house.
assume those are the plans.
This is something you have to sign. I don't know if it's that. Yeah.
It's your cup there.
I mean, are there any questions? Is there anyone?
How many houses?
One
One.
house.
One house?
Yeah. That's why we don't really hear it. It's not a subdivision. It's just a,
Any public questions or? Nope. Then typically we do have a motion once we've reviewed this, if we determine that the frontage requirements are met, and the frontage requirements are 125 feet.
what are they? Kevin, do you know what?
What's that?
What are they combining?
Combining here.
So there's this, so this lot here.
No, it's all right.
And then this lot.
So these 2 lots
Yeah.
and this lot.
In this lot over here.
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. See
Yep.
how they coming right down here? And that's giving them a frontage on Reservoir Road.
So here's 129 feet there, and
That's giving them the proper frontage.
Yeah.
That's quite an act.
The lot shape. I mean, this is all what it is, but.
Right.
was there a
This
discussion
is-
of, like, I would assume, looking at this, that this creates the potential to have the driveway come in.
So
No,
what
you
they're,
don't have
what they're
enough
do, what they're planning on doing is putting a house right about here. It's 35 feet away from.
That's
what
the only
lot
place they
is.
could, I guess they
Yeah.
could put it there, but then they gotta go over
Yeah,
the sewer
sewer
easement.
easement, yeah.
So they want a Reservoir Road address
Yes.
or Oak?
Nope,
Yeah.
Reservoir Road.
Yeah, it's 22
There's not enough,
feet.
yes.
Yeah, there's nothing that could happen there. Although they could buy
That's where they're getting it, I believe.
I'd rather they buy that lot, it looks better.
Well, what I
but
mean is they could
wouldn't. Yes.
add to this lot and put
Yes,
a.
well, that's fine, because it's already a lot. That would just be a bigger lot and include that.
And was there a lawsuit at one point with the?
I'm not familiar with one, no. That was mentioned at one of our meetings, but
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
A lawsuit on what?
They didn't want anything built back there due to
With
water
these people?
issues.
Oh, yeah, that's what, well, she mentioned
They
that
did, there
there
were
people who
neighbors
have-
that were concerned about water on Pond Plain, which is down here.
But it's been addressed by our town engineer.
Infiltration
yeah.
systems.
So they're comfortable that putting a house there is not gonna adversely affect any neighbors.
Shall we sign?
All right, so I think just we can have a motion to find that it's, a motion to approve the approval not required.
All right, I'll move, we approve the ANR.
Second.
All those in
Whoops, that's
favor?
not mine.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So you
Any
need to sign with
objections?
this, right?
All right.
Sharpie.
Only on,
On the Mylar?
on the,
Oh,
this
okay.
is the
Is there a
Mylar.
Mylar?
Yeah, this is the Mylar right here. Is the-
So-
The last, so we can just sign that as we go.
5-0.
Who made the motion?
I did.
He made the motion, I
Forgot.
second.
Are there any other updates without, I'm not going to go through the updates unless people saw things that they wanted to raise, but since we don't have Abby here to kind
Yeah,
of go over it.
no, I mean, that, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
And then with the minutes, I have not had a chance to review the minutes from 7:10.
I have not either.
All right. So I think we need to sign the document there. Does anyone else know of any other issues that we need to address tonight? Then I would
Public has heard
welcome
everything? The public heard everything they want to hear? Anything they want to bring up?
Would anyone like to
Any
say
other stuff?
anything?
Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. I just wanted to ask, I've heard some things floating around, and I just wanted to run it by the planning board to see if you're aware of what's happening with the Westwood Lodge property.
I know they had a agreement.
Wait, I'm sorry. Actually, I remember there was something we needed to consider, so don't leave. She had requested we discuss something, and we didn't discuss it at the last meeting, and we were going to make sure we covered it today, so I want to respect that.
Who are you talking about? Nada?
Nada, yes, you had raised some concerns about the comprehensive plan, the survey in particular. Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
So I'm sorry I'm out of order here, but I remembered that you had raised some questions about a survey for the comprehensive plan and had some other concerns that you had emailed us, and we had not responded to the last meeting, and I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to address that before you left, okay? But Ms. Fusco was in the middle of saying something.
I'm sorry, I appreciate it. Go ahead, you want to go first? I wasn't on the agenda, so I didn't.
Yeah, so I was just curious as to what is going on with Westwood Lodge property. I mean, I know realtors that have looked up the property. They don't even know that it was sold, and I'm hearing possible.
Once it's sold, you'll know, because it's public record.
But
Once it's.
it wasn't
past
even on the market as far as.
And it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
You could sell your house without telling anyone, if you know what, I mean,
Yeah.
they can go behind the scenes and find a buyer.
And the other thing is, I've heard that it's a possible 20 home subdivision.
Anything's possible. They can come before us with anything. We don't hear anything officially until they come before us. So we can't speculate, we can't talk about, we can talk about zoning, but we can't say, oh,
Well,
we'd be in
that's the
favor
other
of that. We
question
wouldn't be in
is,
favor of that.
wi-
But
with-
it's a residential zone.
But it's also grandfathered in for.
Yeah, if the new owner
So-
says, I'll go residential, then we have to hear a project possibly on residential.
Right, but the other question is that with regards to the articles from last fall, town meeting, specifically Article 11, with the lingo, with medical terminology, and there's a lot of unsure things going to happen. with wanting to change the language with the medical from doctor, dentist to substance abuse, mental health, and what areas are being targeted for that zoning language
Was that
to
Article 11?
to change, yes.
So
I
it
don't
would have been
remember.
townwide. It was just, it was the definition of medical, which was in the definition section, should apply to all
It
zoning.
was just updating the language on how we define medical?
No,
as a
they
town?
actually applied substance abuse facility to the ARO areas down, Meditech down on East Street, as well as an area, I think it was Farm Lane and.
Farm Lane?
Farm Lane?
No, I forget the
sound
area
right.
that it was. Somewhere,
Hill Village,
somewhere
yes,
down
yeah.
there.
Louder Brook Road.
AOR is.
The
I'm not-
Clark, well, the Clark
Yeah.
House was
I'd have to
there,
pull
which
up the
has since
zoning map.
closed, but
But they did designate those two specific areas.
Right, but so they identified existing commercial areas, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, not,
Right, it was what, the
not opening it up
HB
to the whole town to
HB
use
zone?
that. Highway business zone? Is that what it
ARO.
was?
business zone,
ARO?
I believe.
Yeah, it's two very small.
Oh, it's a little concerning since Westwood Lodge was, in place there for many years, and now all of a sudden they're looking to change the medical language and possibly put it here at Meditech or over here at, Fox Hill Village area. So it just sounds a little
Are you,
planned or,
are you concerned that
Yeah.
something's going to go into the lodge that wasn't there?
No, I think what
Previously?
he's
No,
saying
what
is
I'm
that
saying
there
is-
a place for it, for a substance abuse center where it's already designated as a mental health or
Right.
or an addiction facility.
Right.
That would be a more plausible area for it versus Meditech.
That's
am I hearing
correct.
that right?
Yeah.
So I think, we don't
That's up
know.
to the owners of that location.
So I think the answer, we don't know what's going on with what people are planning, but with respect to that article, if we go through the process again, then we'll get into it again in terms of that. Nothing, that article didn't get approved, so nothing has changed in the
Right,
zoning from what it
right.
was before. I know you had also asked about like a minute clinic at some point, and
Right. Did you ever hear back from that?
so my
Dave?
understanding from talking to Abby, the question was, would a minute clinic be permitted in the CVS? And the answer I received from Abby through Joe Doyle was that that they would consider that that he would consider it an accessory use that was just retail sales. Like it wouldn't be a medical. It would be permitted right now. Like it would be not something that would require anything special. So
It
that's
wouldn't
why I'd
be
hope to
permitted
have
right now?
Abby here to respond on that.
Would or would not?
It would currently be
Permitted?
permitted because of their interpretation of the Minute Clinic as being a retail use. And I said, well, the Minute Clinics
They diagnose.
diagnose and prescribe.
And treat.
Have nurse practitioners.
So that's not
So it
typical,
starting to sound a lot more like
retail.
a doctor's office or something, or doctor's office use. So
That, it just does not sound right.
So that's, I think we'll ask for another update on that if I think it's
Right. Well, it
fair
was
to
just
ask
never
whether-
mentioned in any of the planning, so I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that's, slid through without knowing, so.
So on that note, on Article 11, so the physical therapy place that's there, it's not zoned for that. Do they have to go before the ZBA?
No, it is zoned for that. So it's a
Well-
permitted use as it is. The Article 11 had no impact on Islington.
But it's not a dentist or a doctor's office.
It's a medical professionals, I forget we pull up the table of zoning uses. It is the office of a medical professional, I believe is the thing.
That's what it was changed to, right?
No, that's the existing, like, it's there now, so it had to be permitted. Like, I guess that's the thing.
The FMUOD description?
It's one of the uses in the FMUOD. Like, the FMUOD lists a bunch of uses.
Right.
Those are defined in the definitions. And one of those definitions is like the office of a medical professional, I think. That definition was not a part of Article 11's work. And if it had been, then the physical therapy office wouldn't have been able to open because Article 11 was not passed.
Did it come in after last fall town meeting or prior to? I don't remember.
The FMUOD
No,
allowed uses?
the physical therapy.
When did they move in?
Yeah. Was it before last fall town meeting or after?
I think it was
I
because
think it
can't
was last summer that they were there, because they
Was
moved
it?
in the same time the dentist moved in.
I don't, I see, I don't remember.
Soon
the
after they
time.
opened, I think. Didn't they? And that's been open for a year and a half, a year.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly
Mm.
when they moved in.
All right, now to go ahead.
All right, so I think, Nada, did you have questions?
Please, I just have one comment about the zoning bylaws. What you're talking about, Fran, sorry. I think the problem is our zoning bylaws are changed prior to the Attorney General's office issuing a determination whether or not the vote at town meeting was legal or not and acceptable, or whatever their review process is. And I see that when I look at the zoning bylaws at home, it will say something pending Attorney General's review. But there's never something that I can refer back to that gives me the language prior to the town meeting that adopted these pending approvals from the Attorney General. And I know that's not your department, but the problem is we are deleting things that are available to the residents online with respect to the zoning bylaws, and they shouldn't be deleted. For instance, Article 10, 11, and 12 from November 2017 Fall Town Meeting was rejected by the Attorney General's Municipal Law Division. When you go online to our website and look at our zoning bylaws, you cannot get the previous version of our zoning bylaws before this determination came out. It's like whoever changes it at town hall changes it and says, oh, these are our new zoning bylaws, but you know what, we're waiting for the AG's approval. It shouldn't be that way. And again, it's not your department, but I think maybe if you encourage someone at town hall to say, look, we need to have our zoning bylaws, put them somewhere that says superseded with dates, but don't delete something or add something and not, I don't have anything to compare it to. That's the problem. And what Fran is saying about this Article 11 is what you're saying about the medical professional and what you're referring to. I'm not so sure that our zoning bylaw said a medical professional's office. I think it may have been what Debbie referred to, that it was a doctor or a dentist's office, is what it was. But nobody can find it because somebody deleted the previous zoning bylaws. So all of this is all good and well, but we don't know what's going on when we're looking at something that says pending approval from the AG, because we can't see what was happening before that town meeting and that vote. Do I make sense? Does that make sense to you people?
Yeah, we can ask Abby about that.
That's what's going on here. And I appreciate you listening to me because I'm trying to figure out myself. I mean, the town's been on notice. It's hard to find things. That's why we're redesigning our website or something. But the problem is we can't delete last year's zoning bylaws. They have to be somewhere where you and Fran and myself can go and look at them and then see, oh, well, this is what we just approved, but the Attorney General has to approve it, allow it.
There should be a link to the older bylaws.
I hope I'm making sense here.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
So we can definitely find out about that. I'm sure that I don't want to say.
Yeah.
I remember a document that said, with the changes, and another document that they always say up through a certain date, so through town meeting of whatever time, but we'll find out if there's a way to get the history of all of each change. I'm sure it exists somewhere, so. Are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to raise? Yes, Ellen.
Sorry, I just had a quick question to kind of piggyback on, Ellen Rawlings, 86 Green Hill Road. It's Westwood, so the rumors are abounding about Westwood Lodge. There was a pervasive confusion about what the current zoning of that lot is. I've been telling people, because my understanding is it's single-family residence C, or B, I think it's C.
It would show right there.
Right, with a grandfathered use for whatever Westwood Lodge is now. What is the technical terminology for that grandfathered use? That's what I was not clear on.
You'd have to, it's.
Hospital.
I don't think it's in our collective mind. We'd have to.
Gotcha.
You'd have to look that up.
That's like a Nora or Abby question. I think Nora said it at a meeting. She's probably
researched it, and especially now knowing that they're on the market.
But bottom line, someone can't just walk in there and decide they want to build an apartment building. They would have to go for a zoning change for that. True.
Depending on what it's zoned for.
Yeah,
They
it's
might do
single
townhouses or, I don't know.
Single-family C, I believe. And no,
Is that what it
They
is?
could not
SRC.
build an apartment building there.
Because that's one of the rumors that's floating around is.
You know, I mean.
The hyperbole
You know,
of this
well,
town is staggering.
Yes.
This
But I
is-
just wanted to make sure I wasn't misspeaking that it is zoned for single-family residence, whatever it is. It's not multifamily, it's not general residence, with some sort of grandfathered use for whatever the lodge is
However
qualified
that was
as.
worked out since the
40s, yeah, or whatever.
We've seen in other towns, as we come up upon the census, developers with deep pockets will buy land and sit on it, waiting the census.
Hoping
And
for something to
right,
change.
and
Right.
if they get the golden ticket, it's great. If not, they're sitting on a lot of acreage in Westwood.
Right.
They're gonna make money, one way or the other. So it could be a 40B developer who's looking at buying it. We don't know.
That was the other concern that I'd heard from
It
residents.
very well could be. He could sit on that and just hope for us to dip below 10%.
Boom.
Well, with all the
That's it.
accessory apartments, we
Yeah.
might be nearing that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Do I have a motion to?
I'll make a motion to
Let's make sure we've closed everything we need to close or whatever.
Did everybody sign that plan?
Yeah, everyone, oh, you guys need to sign the
Everybody's still in the
Mylar on top with a Sharpie. Do a Sharpie on the top one. And a regular pen on the other. There's just 3 copies, right?
3
Three
copies.
copies, yeah.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.